Hello, everybody, and welcome to the International Fundraising Across Borders Conference 2021, the IFAB2021. I am very glad to have you here, and I'm looking forward to spend the next 4 to 5 hours with you. My name is Anna. I am the Executive Director of the Chaplain York Hong Kong Foundation for Charities, and I am your moderator for today. The IFAB21 is a 3-day conference. We had already a session in the Europe and African time zone, one in the Americas, and I'm very much looking forward to the one in our beautiful Asia Pacific region. We would not have been able to organize this conference without the help of our philanthropic experts and partners, and I just would like to thank our sponsors, WealthX, Boomerang, and Loungy for the support to make this conference hopefully a very successful event for everybody. The aim of IFAB21 is to give you a wealth of information and to exchange experiences to drive your major gift fundraising endeavors forward. However, it is also a unique opportunity to network with fellow fundraisers and experts around the world, and I would really like to encourage you to pick up this opportunity and engage in networking activities. Our networking platform is the Chaplain York Connect platform, to which you are all logged on now. And to make you as comfortable as possible using it, I will just share a very short video to explain how it works.
You can interact with other attendees and speakers in the chat and Q&A. You can also browse the attendees and speaker list. Click on an attendee profile to see their information. For each profile, we show a matching score, and by clicking on this small icon, you can see the reasons you have to connect with that person. You can then decide to send them a connection request. You also have another option, which is book meeting, to plan a video call with them. It can be a one-on-one call or a multi-person video call if you add more people.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Alex, for sharing this one with us. A short reminder for today's agenda. We will start with a keynote speech, which will be followed by a session on prospect research, a session on cultivation, a session on stewardship of major international gift donors, and then we go over to tax and legals in the international fundraising. We have scheduled a few breaks after some of these sessions to allow everybody to get up, stretch, get a coffee, a tea, or lunch. Every break is about 10 minutes long, and the first one will take place at 9:50 Hong Kong time. So be aware, in Sydney you are 3 hours ahead, and in Auckland you are 5 hours ahead. I do hope that we have a lot of participants from a variety of countries in the Asia Pacific region, and I can't wait to see where you are all coming from. We will start a short poll because we really would like to get to know yourself better, to be able to respond better to your own individual needs. So please do actively participate in this poll, and we will use the results when we also enter in our question and answer session. With this, I would like to introduce to you our panels. We have a very large panel today with 4 panelists. The first one is Edward Wong. Edward, could you just raise your hand so that everybody
Hello, everybody.
That,
good morning.
Who you are. Excellent.
Hi.
Good morning, Edward. He is based in Hong Kong. Edward is the founder and principal advisor of an independent consultancy. He has actually a corporate marketing background, but then changed his professional career to turn to the social good in the millennium year, and has since then helped and advised a number of nonprofits to raise substantial funds and to improve their philanthropic and brand profiles. Welcome, Edward, to the IFAB21.
Thanks for your introduction.
The next one I would like to introduce to you is Nicole Aerosmith. Nicole, could you just say hello, please?
Good morning, everybody.
Good morning. Nicole is based in Australia on the Gold Coast. She is an awarded fundraising professional with 13 years of experience in various organizations in the US and in Australia. And she's currently the head of fundraising and philanthropy for the Arts Center HOTA, the Home of the Arts, in the Gold Coast. She has led the development of fundraising, sponsorship, and philanthropic strategies for the center, launched a founding donor program and the new HOTA membership program. And we are very glad to have you here with us, Nicole. Then I would like to introduce you to John Godfrey. John, could you just say hello, please? Well, maybe we pass on to Sheila Murray. Sheila, are you here?
Hi everybody. Good afternoon in New Zealand.
Excellent. Good afternoon, Sheila. Sheila Murray is the director of University of Otago's Development and Alumni Relation Office in New Zealand, as she said. She leads the development of his fundraising, alumni relations, advancement services, and the events. And she has over 20 years of experience in the philanthropy sector in the higher education and for the nonprofit world. While John will hopefully log on.
I'm here, Anna. I'm here.
Excellent. Good morning, John.
Kia ora koutou. Hello, everybody. Also from New Zealand. Yes. Anna.
Very good. John is an independent philanthropy advisor and fundraising consultant with a major expertise for major donors, capital campaigns, individual giving, business partnerships, and fundraising strategies. He has worked and consulted in a number of countries in the Middle East, India, in Singapore, the UK, Australia, and New Zealand, and is currently the head of New Zealand's Fundraising Institute. Welcome on board, John.
Thanks, Anna. I should correct that. I'm not, I was the chair of the Fundraising Institute of New Zealand up until about 3 weeks ago, but that role has passed on to others, so I won't claim credit for that.
Oh, thank you. Well, 3 weeks ago, that's quite a short time to be the outgoing one. And then finally, I would like to introduce you to our keynote speaker who will open this Asia Pacific session for us. Our keynote speaker today is Nancy Bixon. Nancy, could you just wave and say hello, please? Excellent. Nancy is the managing director of Chaplain York. She is a lawyer with over 30 years of experience providing advice to clients and charities around the world. She has lived in the United States, the United Kingdom, in Australia, and in France, and is a specialist in cross-border philanthropy and fundraising for a range of organizations and donors. Nancy, please, I'll hand over to you.
Greetings, everyone. Good morning, and thank you very much for coming to our IFAB 2021. What we really wanted to do this year was to focus on international major gift fundraising, because it is such an important part for so many organizations, and particularly in the international sphere, when one is trying to decide what kind of fundraising to do. Major gift fundraising is usually top of the tree, because one spends so much time and so much money, doing things internationally, that to look for small transactional gifts often isn't cost and time effective. But we wanted to do it now because obviously, we have all gone through and are still, to some extent, going through a really unique time in the world with this pandemic. And whilst I think we're all getting tired of hearing the word pandemic, it has identified for us a whole lot of a fair number of things that international and fundraisers generally have had to deal with. I mean, not the least of which are things like you couldn't run events anymore. And for international people, it meant, not getting on an airplane in the same way as we used to. I know that when we locked down in the UK, I really struggled with the fact that instead of being on an airplane with somebody asking me if I wanted tea or coffee, I looked around the house to see if anybody was going to offer me anything, and found out I had to go make it myself, which was hugely disappointing. So it's been a very interesting time for all of us. You know, the travel has been curtailed, and so that sort of raises, for me at least, this whole question of where are we going to go from here? Are we going to go back to the traditional ways that we have done international fundraising, often which meant flying into a city, possibly if you're with an educational institution with a VC or principal in tow, seeing a few people, possibly running a board meeting if you have a foreign organization, which I will talk about later when I come to the tax and legal bit. But, you know, and seeing a few people possibly running an event and then flying on to the next city and around the world like that. We're starting to see that happening again. We have clients in Chapel New York that are starting to report that they're back on the airplanes, masks in hand, and starting to see some people. But the pandemic, when we couldn't do that, really demonstrated a lot of really interesting things, which I know this panel and the speakers are going to be talking about. You know, what else can you do to cultivate and steward your donors whilst you're not sitting there in a room with them? So with obviously technology, the fact that we're having this event by Zoom, as opposed to all of us sitting in a room somewhere in Hong Kong or Singapore or Australia, where we've all had to fly there, pay for hotel rooms and the like, or, you know, makes it a very different situation. It also means we can't meet up in the bar afterwards, which is the very disappointing part of these Zoom calls. But we have also seen that organizations that have really strong relationships, and I think that's the one thing we've noticed more than anything, is that relationships was key to what was happening with organizations and their donors in the last couple of years. Those that had the strongest relationships were really able to reach out to their donors and say, we need you. There was that initial rush to give money to things relating to health, but again, other organizations were able to say, you've been supporting us for a long period of time. Please, we need your help now. We aren't be able to do our usual things. We need you. And those donors responded. So I think the first thing that I would say is that and probably the last, is that relationships has really been key to what we do. Of course, we know that relationships that lead to major gifts, both before and during and after the pandemic, is always the main issue relating to major gift fundraising anyway. Without a proper relationship, major gifts will very rarely flow anyway. But it is absolutely crucial, and it's been demonstrated amazingly how important that is. We've also seen that technology now can play an increasing part in what you're doing. So we have had organizations. We had a wonderful client who, an arts organization in Italy, that was able to stream to their donors and to their supporters around the world backstage of their properties. So they managed to get a camera back there, and so people who would never have been able to see things were able to see things that would not have been ordinarily open to them, which was a compensation for not being able to schedule the annual trips which those donors would have made to those properties. So there was the creativity. I know that the Met in New York reached out to the world and went into their back catalog of operas and played them, and asked people to give $100 to support the Met and raise millions on the back of it. So there's both been some difficulties that we've all seen, And there's been some wonderful creativity in looking at what's going on. The question will be, how do we take some of that forward? What are the expectations of our donors? Do we all revert back to what we did before, or is there a mixture, which will make a lot of sense? I noticed when I was coming to London this morning that the car park at my local station, which was absolutely empty, of course, during the pandemic, and was absolutely empty for the 6 months after we stopped our lockdown, is slowly creeping back to having more and more cars in it, although not to pre-pandemic levels where you couldn't get a place to park. So it is a fascinating issue of how we all move forward with this entirely. I think the other things I wanted to say, just is to raise a few issues, you know, the building and maintaining the pipeline is another crucial element, which we all know in terms of major gift fundraising. What you do with major gifts, whether it's international or whether it's with your local major donors, it hasn't changed. It's all about individuals giving to individuals. The right person with the right ask, the right time, by the right person. Those fundamentals never change. But what we haven't seen are things like, are solicitations possible from abroad? Do you have to be sitting in the same room as we all assumed you had to do before? Or are there new norms that we're going to bring to this whole area as we think about what makes sense, not only because of the pandemic, but of course because the we're in COP26 at the moment and all looking what's environmentally sustainable and responsible, and to see whether the constant flying around to see people is a responsible thing to do. So I'm going to leave you, and even a few minutes early, I think, just to say that this is going to be it's been a fascinating day, the last 2 days in the Americas, in Europe, to listen to everybody talk about what they have done in the last couple of years, what they see happening as we all go forwards. And I highly encourage everybody for this. I'm going to come back to talk about tax and legal things in a few hours. But we have had some really interesting success stories through this pandemic. We had an arts organization that somebody just reached out. They knew about them. They were just the opposite of building a good relationship. They came and said to everybody, we know that you're going to be in real trouble over the next months whilst nobody can visit you. So could we please write you a check for £500,000, which was a very much appreciated thing, and which we probably wouldn't have expected before. There was no relationship before that sort of thing happened. On the other hand, we've seen international organizations suffering, obviously, because people were thinking locally. That's another thing we're going to all have to look at, whether that ability to encourage people to give internationally, in terms of when you're doing that, when you're thinking about your international case for support, how's that changing, or has it? Or again, are people going back to what they've always really cared about? There's a fascinating thing in front of us today, and I thank you all very much for coming. We're very pleased to be able to do this. I can't thank our speakers and panelists enough for their joining us. They're giving us hours of their time to help us all think through what's going to be happening in the years 2022 and going forwards. So it's going to be a great day, guys, and I'll look forward to seeing how this all develops. So thank you all very much for coming, and I'll turn back to Anna to take us forward to the next session.
Thank you, Nancy, and thank you very much for this excellent keynote speech. I really like that you reminded us that the heart of our work actually has not changed even throughout the pandemic, which is that we talk to persons who give and support other persons. It is true that sometimes it can easily be forgotten, if we use all the technology that we have today and we can't really see each other anymore in person. So thank you very much for this really important reminder. I would like to introduce you now to Valentina Guerini, who is our speaker for the Prospect Research session, our next session. Valentina is the Senior Director of the Philanthropy Division of WealthX, and she's covering the commercial activities for higher education and the not-profit sector in the Middle East region and in the Asia-Pacific region. WealthX is also an important partner for us for this conference, and I would just like to show you a short video, introductory video of what they are doing.
When it comes to doing business with the world's wealthiest people, traditional engagement strategies fall short. Wealthy individuals have distinct preferences for how they want to invest, donate, and spend their resources, so it takes a tailored approach to connect with them. WealthX data helps you create an informed strategy for success. WealthX has developed the world's largest database of wealthy individuals, built and maintained by our global research team. We provide in-depth intelligence to help you gain a thorough understanding of your wealthy clients, donors, and prospects. WealthX empowers you to uncover and identify target individuals, understand their complete profile, from wealth analysis to interests and passions, as well as a map of their personal network, and build an effective engagement strategy that will make a connection with them. From nonprofits and higher education, to financial services, to those specializing in luxury items like yachts, jewelry, and more, WealthX will help you maximize your relationships with the wealthy. Contact us today to schedule your personalized demo.
Excellent. Valentina has, over the last 5 years, grown and managed the WealthX philanthropy client base in the Middle East and the Asia-Pacific region. She's supporting development teams on evolving their strategies to identify, attract, and engage very affluent donors through targeted wealth intelligence. Prior joining to WealthX, Valentina has been working as an event manager for a global event agency in London with a focus on fundraising events for organizations. I'm very glad to welcome Valentina today to our conference. And just before she will start her speech, I would like to encourage you to send us your questions, your comments, your ideas in the chat function. You can send them through whenever they come to your head, and then we will go back to them in our panel session after each presentation, and also in our Q&A session at the end of the conference. So please feel free to engage actively and send us your questions. Valentina, up to you now.
Thank you, Anna, and good morning, everyone, and thank you for having me here today. You saw the video, WealthX, what we do, but what we're going to dive in today is a few case studies as to how research is important in every stage of the major donor cycle, from identifying the right type of individuals. And I love, Nancy, hearing you talk about the right people at the right time. That is very much what research does. It's about being more targeted and effective. We're also going to look at what's been going on in the space of the affluent individuals in Asia Pacific. How has the pandemic impacted the growth of this type of population, and also their spend and their donations? And let me just start by a little bit on me, and Anna, thank you for that introduction. I've been at WealthX for 5 years, working in Asia Pacific, in the Middle East, but also in Europe. And the landscape has dramatically changed, and it keeps on evolving. This is primarily dictated to the need for research on individuals to have a more personalized approach, but also individuals are changing in terms of their preferences, the way that they donate. And so it's important to track that and have information on that. I come from an event background. When we used to organize events, in my previous role, we were doing guest lists based on individuals that could potentially donate, of course, but it was just looking at capacity. It wasn't looking at maybe networks, sitting the right people together that know each other at a table, building a bond between an ambassador, a donor ambassador, and a potential prospect, just being much more strategic in this type of decision making. So then the jump to WealthX was quite interesting, and being able to work with so many different types of organizations, from a small local charity all the way to an international university. There's so many different types of applications for research, and we're going to look at it together. A bit of terminology, just so you know what these symbols are as we go through this. There's different definitions. Everyone have their own, but at WealthX, we use the term ultra high net worth for anyone with a net worth above 30 million US dollars. There's about 250,000 of these individuals in the world. And of course, it includes about close to now 3,000 billionaires that exist in the world today. And then we also look at the very high net worth space. Anyone that has a net worth between 5 and 29 million. We're talking about 16 million people here. It's a very much larger piece of the pie. And over the years, we've used different types of sources, public sources always, to be able to uncover these individuals and not just know who they are from a capacity or how much they're worth from a capacity perspective, but really understand what makes them tick, what are their motivations, what type of causes do they support. So this slide shows you a little bit of the type of research that is put together by the team, the WealthX team. We're so lucky to have an army of research, 160 researchers. They speak, I think, in 45 different languages they're at right now. So that allows us, one, to know how to, first of all, where to look, where to find this information on philanthropic history, on networks, if they have a foundation, what about their family relationships, just really allowing to have a good understanding as to who are these individuals, how to cultivate their relationship, how to engage them, what type of ask, but also how to grow the relationship from there. We're going to look at that today as well. These are some stats or some slides from our World Ultra Wealth report. These are reports we publish every year, available on our website, free to download. I highly recommend you have a look and maybe look at your local context too. We do highlight the regional change, but also go into some specific in some countries. And this has definitely been 2020 and 2021, an interesting year. The pandemic has had a huge impact on the wallets of these individuals. And I was talking at IFAB in Europe the other day, and we're talking about the decline of wealth in Europe. But let's look at Asia today. Look at that increase, 5.2% increase in the population size, but also in the wallet as well. So very strong compared to the other regions. And why is that? That is predominantly due to a good response or fast response to the pandemic. In Asia in particular, China, Japan, and South Korea have performed extremely well, and we'll see a few stats on those as well. And this is talking about the very high net worth population. There is a forecast in 2025 that the population size in Asia will grow to, actually globally, will grow to 3.8 million individuals. So that is a rise of almost an additional million individuals that will come into a lot of wealth. And we're also going to look at who are these type of individuals, new generations of affluent individuals inheriting wealth, entrepreneurs creating wealth, and also how their way of donating will be different, and ultimately way of cultivating as well. Here we see the top countries. So the US is always staying strong at the top, but China surpassed Japan in 2014 and consolidated their position in second place with an 8% year-on-year change in population. There has been a decrease in Hong Kong, predominantly because of the political situation, but also economical. And then you'll see here in this next slide. Oop. This one, I really wanted to highlight the growth of South Korea, 13%. That's the highest growth that we've had in the region. Really, we're hearing South Korea is mentioned in most of my conversations. There's a lot of potential in this market, so something to definitely keep an eye on. Now, I was asked to, in the IFAB Europe Day, to talk about China a little bit more. China is definitely an extremely interesting market, both in terms of the growth rate, but also in terms of the type of affluent individuals in this market. We're talking about very young affluent individuals. If you look at the table on the right, just the pie graph, the majority of wealth is self-made individuals compared to potentially inherited wealth, which is quite unique and compared to other regions, other markets. The other thing is the growth of the cities and the rapid growth of cities. So Shanghai, Beijing, and Shenzhen are the first three, with a really strong number of both very high net worth individuals and ultra high net worth individuals. Again, these are little snippets, but there's a lot of deep dive in the reports that, again, you can access easily on the website. Now, let's talk about philanthropy, because although the world is changing, the population size is evolving, it has been a particular tricky year economically, but philanthropy is still increasing. There is a lot of donation that are being tracked from affluent individuals, and overall last year we've tracked over $73 billion of donations being done, of which 20 to 30% were coming from affluent individuals. But also what is changing is the culture of giving. Why are individuals feeling more responsibility in giving back to society, to their own communities? There's a growing awareness of the environmental issues, and conference in Glasgow is a great example of that, and really concern about wealth inequality as well. So combining growth in wealth, growth in that social responsibility really puts us in a situation where there are great opportunities for large gifts. And so it brings us to the next point, where it's about engaging and attracting these right individuals. These are the future trends. I would be curious and happy to read the questions or read your comments in the chat box. To see if you're actually experiencing this as well. We're seeing the evolution of ultra high net worth engagement, how people are engaged. We talk so much about financial instruments, impact investing. We also, as we mentioned before, the expectation that they give back to society, and the Giving Pledge in the US, I think, is a great example of a network of billionaires signing up to be able to give back a large portion of their wealth to philanthropy. But also the new generations, millennials, they're extremely more digital, they are much more socially aware and environmentally aware, and potentially they also want to be involved and invested with their organization. So knowing how to cater to these type of donors too. And then, of course, impact investing. So as I mentioned before, I know that impact is not always easy for organizations to show at times. If you're talking about emergency disaster relief, it's not always that straightforward. But with these special gifts, these special ask, comes a greater responsibility of being able to show where that impact lies, and that also plays into stewardship, and we'll look at that as well. So where is research needed? I like to divide it in four buckets, but there's also the cycle of a major donor, and you have the little table circle at the bottom. Identifying the right type of individuals is key. Most importantly, from a time and resource perspective, resources are scarce. We must be extremely focused in being able to cultivate the right type of relationships and knowing to attract individuals, not just based on wealth, but based on their affinity to a particular type of theme, based to linkage to your network for ease of engagement. So prospect research allows you to do precisely that. It's not about quantity, it's about the quality of the right individuals in your prospect pipeline. So prospect research is qualification of the right prospect, helps you inform your engagement strategy, helps you understand how to cultivate that relationship and what type of ask to make, especially if you look at, for example, their philanthropic history, what type of amounts have they donated in the past. Then the growing, and especially in Asia, the growing pillar is network mapping. I think Nancy mentioned it in the keynote as well. It's all about those relationships, and building relationships is not just to attract, it's not just to be able to have a closer connection with that person, but it's also about being able to widen your connections and open up to new potential contacts. The best way to reach these individuals is through introducers, through the right type of avenues. But instead of relying on one extremely influential person, it's about understanding the opportunities of all the individuals within your network and how to properly leverage those connections for growth. So network mapping is looking at first and second degree relationships of affluent, but also non-affluent individuals to be able to study the right engagement strategy. Then the third bucket is prospecting, finding new individuals. We'll look at a few case studies on this too. And wealth is the first factor, but it shouldn't be the main one. What we really want to find is individuals that have a strong affinity to that cause, that are showing propensity to give. They might be involved and invested in different type of foundations and boards. That also helps you understand what type of a cultivation strategy to adopt. Should I talk more about, should these individuals be passive, just be donors, or should they be more actively involved? And of course, linkage to the network. All these research elements make up a score that tell you which are the best prospects you should be focusing on. And then the final bucket, another growing aspect in philanthropy, is due diligence. Probably for some organizations might be there. I would say there have been in recent years a lot of scandals of organizations accepting donations or being tied to families that made their wealth in doubtful ways. And so why is due diligence important if you're fundraising from an individual, from a company, or from a foundation? It's all about protecting your reputation. And due diligence is tough, especially if you're doing international fundraising. You might have individuals from different parts of the world. So being able to find information on how they made their wealth, if they're on any sanctions list, what about if they're connected to what we call politically exposed individuals, PEPs, and being able to do that research in various languages to really have all your grounds covered is extremely important and necessary. So we talk about due diligence as well. Also on companies and foundations. And so it's what is research? Why is it needed? It's really about moving from a reactive way of doing fundraising to a proactive way, where you target the right individuals with the right type of strategy. And as Nancy said, the right time as well. It allows you to navigate this and build a roadmap for a targeted strategy. Let's look at the first case study. Here we're talking about an organization, a local NGO that had a database of donors, but had never had never done proactive major donor fundraising. And where do we start with an organization like this? We want to see what the potential is within their own walls. We want to see if over the years they've attracted some affluent individuals with small donations, potentially, really it's not about the big numbers, but small donations, but individuals that we know have capacity to donate more, and prioritize the ones that actually have had donation done quite frequently. And so what we do in this case is we would take that donor database and we would match it against the WealthX database of affluent individuals. This is the most immediate, most targeted way of immediately qualifying leads within an existing database. In the space of really a month, 2 months, we're able to know who are the affluent individuals that have chosen that organization. So there already is that strong affinity. Now we know that there is capacity. Now, not all the individuals identified will be the right type of matches. So then you go ahead, you do that additional research to select the top 5, the top 10, the top 50 ones that you target for an upgrade strategy. This can also be done on middle donor strategy. Middle donors are extremely powerful portfolio for sure, but middle donors often are qualified, of course, based on their gift. If someone donates at a middle donor level, they could be extremely generous, not necessarily they could be a major donor prospect. So qualifying based on capacity rather than giving history allows you to have, again, a much more targeted prospect pipeline. Let's look at another example, a prospecting example. So this is all based on affinity. So affinity, geography, but also link to the world of foundation. This is a snippet of a type of search that we've done on our database. So looking for individuals that are passionate about the environment, have donated to potentially climate or conservation causes, but also organizations. So what we've done is we've inserted various type of keywords, and we've restricted it to certain sections of the dossier, the profile of these affluent individuals. This was for a UN agency. They set up a foundation and decided they only wanted to target high net worth individuals. That was their only fundraising stream that they wanted to initiate. But where to start? So they started looking at that affinity, but then they also wanted to look potentially at individuals that had their own private foundation. They wanted to target both the individual, but also in some cases go through the private foundation as well. So we included individuals that have had a private foundation, individuals with a net worth between 5 million and plus, and looking for those in Europe and Southeast Asia. So prospect identification has to happen based on certain criteria such as affinity, such as geography, such as linkage. And so really being able to develop what we call your archetype. What is your ideal donor? What type of criteria that this person have to have? And that allows you to start a research project to be able to find the individuals that meet those criteria. The third case study is looking at network mapping. So when we talk about network mapping, it's not just individuals, it's not just peer-to-peer. For me, network mapping is also about going through companies. It's about going through foundations. The lines between corporate philanthropy, foundation giving, and individual giving can be extremely blurred because individuals have their hands, have created, are involved in a lot of these other organizations and foundations and companies. So what is the first step is about knowing what your strengths are as an organization. Do you have a good a good advisory board? Do you have good board members? What about leadership team that are really well connected? What about any corporate sponsors? What about any ties to foundation? Understanding what your strengths are as an organization then allows you to plan a network mapping project around that and being able to generate leads out of that. I also get quite often we talk about how do I ask for an introduction? I've spoken to my board members, we've asked them to open up their network, but it hasn't happened yet. Now, with network mapping, it's about knowing who they're in contact with. So instead of it being an open question, it's much more of a targeted conversation. It could be, I know you know this person, you guys sit on the same board, or it could be knowing that they went to an event together, mentioning a certain media article, or just dropping in conversation, name dropping in conversation. It's so much harder to say no to that. And we've seen that there's been a lot more success in going with a name in mind rather than asking for introduction in general. So something to keep in mind about that too. And when we talk about peer-to-peer, it's not just the affluent individuals, it's your gatekeepers, your financial advisors. So being able to know who is in their network ahead of time really allows you to go to them with a goal to be able to get access to that particular individual or family. And also family relationships as well. Quite often when we do screenings, when we look at databases, we find relative matches, which are essentially family relationships. We might know the husband, maybe the client has the wife within the database. So the wife is the donor. Wife might not have a lot of footprint or digital footprint to be able to be recognized as an affluent individuals, but we know that the wife is married to, or recently married in some cases, to a very affluent individual. So being able to track those type of relationship as well is extremely important. So I'll leave you with this slide, that the cycle we saw before: identification, qualification, cultivation, solicitation, and stewardship. And today you're going to go through them and you're going to talk about different strategies for each step. But I invite you to think about what type of research you would need for each step and how to leverage research to be more targeted in your efforts. And I'll leave you this link as well. If you ever have any questions on the type of research, even research within your own country, and I'm happy to answer those questions. And I guess now off to the panel.
Thank you, Valentina, for this very interesting presentation on prospect research. I really liked how you introduced the different ways of doing research with your case study. It just makes it much easier to understand and to apply different methodologies in prospect research. So thank you very much for this. Very interesting also to see the development of ultra network individuals in China, Japan, and South Korea. And I wonder if our panel has an opinion on this, or if they could share their own experiences with us with regard to new markets. And maybe I would direct this very first question to John. John, you...
Thanks, Anna. And thank you for directing the first question at me. Well, I mean, first of all, it's very true. Wealth is growing, has been growing substantially in Asia for a decade or more. This, of course, brings challenges to organizations that do not have networks and do not have ways into that growing wealth. But for those that do, clearly it is worth investing in discovering who those connections you have that are living in those regions, that have been successful in those regions. And then WealthX is obviously an excellent resource. There are other resources for prospect research, but making sure that you do that wealth screening that Valentina talked about, comparing your database with a generic database of wealthy people and wealthy philanthropists, looking, and particularly important is looking to see where those people's networks are, or where the networks of people whom you've already got connections with, how they intersect with those networks. Planning on that basis, how you are going to get your case for support in front of those people. And also, of course, again, as Valentina emphasized, it's really important to do that more intensive prospect research to really understand what it is that people are interested in, motivated in, what are their values, what are their beliefs. You know, all of this, prospect research for me is one of the most important tools in a major gift fundraisers toolbox. And an awareness and a consciousness that there is wealth, potentially untapped wealth in Asia, growing wealth in Asia, and being able to discover that in your constituency, amongst your alumni, amongst your audiences, if you're in the arts or education, which a lot of people on this call are, is a way forward to cultivating major gift relationships and bringing in, as Nancy emphasized fairly early on, potentially bringing in substantial income in kind of large quantums, rather than attempting to do the kind of transactional small gift work. So, you know, that is very much what major gifts is about, and prospect researching is very much what major gifts are about. And Asia offers great opportunities for you if you can connect with and engage with people who believe in your cause, or have a connection with your institution.
Thanks,
Anna.
John. Thank you, John. Please free to post any questions that you have in the chat function so that we can take them up during our discussion. I see that amongst our attendees, there are actually 70% of very experienced major gift fundraisers. So let me try to reformulate my next question a bit differently. My next question is actually related to Valentina's point that the new generation and the of major gift donors is currently it's a young one, and especially in China, one with self-made fortunes. I'm curious to hear your opinion if this will change the way how you do the prospect research around this generation, because I guess they do use other networks, other platforms, and they have other types of technology access, right? Like maybe before. Maybe Shilak, as you're working for the alumni office of the University of Otago, do you have experience in a change of prospect research with the new generation?
In particular for those countries, Anna, or more generally?
Both.
So obviously our alumni from Japan, Korea, and China are younger, so we don't have that multi-generational thing at the moment. More like maybe second generation would be all we'd have in New Zealand. For us, that multi-generational is probably more going on in other parts of the world, you know, UK and US, where we've had graduates from there coming from maybe 3 generations possibly. For me, you know, that whole thing about millennials being more socially and environmentally aware is absolutely becoming really apparent. donors now are wanting to know about the impact that their gift can make on the environment, on sustainable investment. That whole area is becoming quite important. And when we're looking at what they want to support, then we have to really conscious of the projects that we are putting up that they do address those kind of concerns. And you know, I think particularly from Asia, in China, you know, you really have to be very careful about the political and cultural environment that you are, you know, working in as well. So that's something we have to also be aware of.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Nicole, how is it in the art world?
Well, in our art world, generally everything has been going really well. We've had our best couple of years yet, and really significant increases across all of the areas of development, major gifts, etc. I'm very mindful though that it's been a really rough year for a couple of years for our sectors, and that a lot of institutions are having a really tough time at the moment. So we have been in a pretty unique position here at Hotter and on the Gold Coast. I was just thinking about those, what you would consider as next generation donors and significant donors. And one thing that's interesting that I've noticed, and very much the last few months, on multiple occasions, people that we would consider as really good prospects representing the next generation have actually come to us in a much more subtle and quiet way. And by that, I mean, they may have made a donation of $1,000 through a name that didn't necessarily connect us directly with them, or they might have connected with our organisation in another way. So, and that's really interesting. I think that those donors are looking to see how we respond, how we then connect with them, and then how we communicate our causes and our interests and what we're doing. So that's been something that's been happening quite a lot, I think, and I think it's very reflective of what that next generation is looking for.
Thank you. Edward, what do you think how it is here in Hong Kong or and amongst the charity sector in general? Can you see this? There is a change?
Yes, of course, but I think the most important change that is needed in the coming future is the mindset change. Not much from the technological side, because from my experience or through my observation, I find a lot of charities in Hong Kong, they want to go after some sorts of major gifts, but they don't know the value of prospect research, and therefore they may not have done any prospect research, or in particular, they may not even have a very comprehensive database in supporting them to do prospect research, or even to identify opportunities from within their existing donor. So I think the most important thing for Hong Kong is for the local charities is their mindset change. And for those international charities or international overseas organizations want to come to raise fund in Hong Kong, I think that data in Hong Kong might not be as comprehensive as in Australia or in the West, because I find that most of the people do not have their information online, or sometimes even for alumni of some overseas university in Hong Kong, alumni in Hong Kong graduate from overseas university, they even don't update their information with their universities. So it is somehow very difficult for those universities to raise funds among their Hong Kong-based alumni. So this is another issue that overseas organizations have to pay attention to when they are planning to do fundraising in Hong Kong among their friends or alumni or whoever in Hong Kong.
I do think there are probably a lot of other countries where the market or where potential donors don't put up their information or their connecting opportunities online. And I wonder, maybe Valentina, I can ask you this question as our expert speaker on this. How do you do the prospect research in less transparent markets? Are there any other tools, like obviously your own database from WealthX, to be able to do a better research? And what would you advise, especially for markets which are less transparent?
Yeah, definitely. In the world of data, there are limitations. It's impossible to know everything, rightfully so. We have to respect the privacy of individuals. And so in the world of data, it's about what you can find. Hong Kong, Japan, Germany, Switzerland, they're all challenging markets because wealth tends to be a little bit more hidden. What makes the difference is having knowledge of where to look. So at WealthX, we use over 1,000 different sources for each market and each type of I would say, model of individual. We have different sources that we go to. We look at company data, real estate data, shareholder data, whatever that could give us an indication of wealth. Then there's a full net worth evaluation that is done. That is a model that we've developed. It's not just information that we find that has to be calculated. For philanthropic history, for example, in the US, you talk about donation, you talk about donation size. We have so much more. In Asia, in Europe, we don't know that much about size of a donation. We might know tendency or affinity to a particular cause because they sit on a certain board, because they went to a particular event. But it is true that it's more hidden, it's more challenging. So I guess it all goes back to what you can find. We can never compare Asia data to the US data. Never. It's completely different. But again, even sometimes just a little indication can help you inform a certain type of strategy.
Thank you. John, do you want to add to that?
Yes, or in fact, probably complement it, because I want to make the point that as valuable and as useful as prospect research is, or the kind of desk, for want of a better word, prospect research that someone like WealthX does, or a prospect research department or prospect researcher within your own institution does, there's really no substitute for people on the ground who have connections, have networks, and know the local knowledge. And I'll talk about, and Edward, I think, is familiar with this, a university that I was involved with in the UK a long time ago now, but where we were very fortunate was that we had in Hong Kong a group of, in fact, they weren't all alumni, but the leader of this group was an alumni. He was an alumnus. He was a great champion for the university. And he formed a network of people, of business people in Hong Kong to try and promote the university there. And amongst those, it turns out, or as it happened, was a member of a very wealthy Asian business family. And not to prolong the story too long, a series of kind of fortuitous events occurred, including the patriarch of that family suffering a mishap on a golf course in Scotland. And there he was, thousands of kilometers away from home, but because he had a connection with this university and with the university staff, they swung into action to ensure that he got the best care and so on. As a result, that person became, and probably still is, or his family, the largest donor to the university. You know, that's a lot of serendipity in that particular story, but it starts with the fact that there were local people who were part of the university or engaged with the university, and it was their networks and their local intelligence that allowed this relationship to develop. And you know, there are multitudes of stories like that, and Sheila and others, I'm sure, can tell similar ones. But the important point is, wherever you can, in my view at least, develop your local networks in countries where you have a reasonable number of donors, particularly if amongst those you believe there are going to be some wealthy prospects, and find ways, have events when we can start to travel again. Obviously, being able to have events overseas is a great way of bringing people into the fold. If you have, as universities often do, academics visiting various countries, get to understand what those academics networks are and where they might take you. So to recapitulate, it's wonderful to do great prospect research. It's wonderful to do wealth screening, but it needs to be complemented with actually using your feet and ears and eyes on the ground. And oftentimes it's the feet and ears and eyes on the ears and whatever on the ground that will bring you to those people who share in your ideals and share in your values, and may well make those very, very large gifts.
Before I would like to address one question that came through the chat, I would actually transfer this to Nicole, because in the arts world, from what I heard now from a lot of major gift fundraisers, it is very much related to where people are and where they can have access to the arts, right? And I'm really curious to know from Nicole how she's doing this, as being based in Queensland for a center who is local, I might say, and who had to deal with potential donors not being able to come to her center. Nicole, can you kind of explain to us how you work with your donors who are outside the region where you are in?
Yeah, it's a really good question, because in this environment that we find ourselves in, we've had two things happen. One is that a number of our donors are in different regions, different countries. And the other thing that's happened is a number of them are in fact stuck here. So we've had two different things going on in two different streams. So it's really obviously about being able to find that balance and being able to work now at a time with people that are actually here, that we can really connect to in terms of sense of place. For us in the Gold Coast, we're about building the cultural capital of our city. So that's this other reason on top of the arts as to how we're connecting people. And that's looking at the basics, which is obviously connecting, getting people here, getting people close by, all of those things. Like everybody, we have adapted with doing video content, with launching programs where we've had artists actually and fundraised for artists to respond quickly during the pandemic. And actually we had a campaign called Rage Against the Virus, where we were actually funding artists to create work in this environment. So we were capturing that in real time, but also wanting to quickly mobilise and kind of artistically capture this time in history. So we have been obviously working across different things and using those other tools of engagement. But ideally, as an arts organisation, our number one strength and the thing that's really important to us is obviously about place, its connection to our institution. And here, even as our philosophy, we talk about an eyes up experience. So it's been fabulous to engage with different tools to keep people connected across borders, but ultimately having people here and connecting with the art needs to be our main focus.
Thank you. It brings me to Patrick's question in our chat box, who is about major gift fundraising, but with a number of existing offices. So Patrick is working for an organization who have a number of offices who all do their own fundraising, and he is now launching a global campaign, if I understand this properly, for major donors. And his particular challenge is that every office holds on their own donors, right? And does not want to share as much as he would like to the database so that he can run a global major donor campaign. Is there anything, have you experienced this in your own professional experience so far? And is there anything that you could advise on how to actually share this knowledge when it comes up to a federal structure like this? Maybe I start with Edward.
I have a similar experience before, but not with different office all over the world. My previous experience is that I worked for a medium-sized local charity some years back, and each department have their own database. They do their own fundraising individually. I am the one, similar to Patrick, I am the centralized guy to do the fundraising for the organization as a whole, instead of for individual department or projects. So what I have done, or the only thing I can done is to show them the benefit, the old saying that, and show them the benefit. At the beginning, they resist, as you guys from your other office, they resist to cooperate, they resist to share the data or information, they resisted to do their work in prospect research. So I do the role model things. I show them what I was doing. I take the initiative to share with them, to show the benefit, why I am doing this and why I am asking them to work together to share the information as well. It takes times. It takes maybe, let me think, it's around a little bit less than 2 years for everyone to buy in, to get their buy-in and to allow them to share the information, and before we can have a centralized database to work everything on the same page. So it takes time and a lot of patience, I would say.
That is quite a long time, 2 years, I must admit.
Yes.
Does anybody else want to add to that?
I would agree, though. It does take a lot of time because people are initially suspicious, they're jealous. Sometimes some of those relationships that they have recorded in their own databases are, or at least in their minds, very special to them. And you know, often they are personal relationships they have. So it does take a great deal of patience and, you know, really clear communication of the objectives and benefits. It is, and I think, Sheila, you may comment on this, it's not uncommon. In fact, I would say it's very common in universities, particularly when, or before, or when the central development function is first being set up. It takes a long time to win the confidence of all those people who have been successfully doing their own fundraising, for them to believe that actually this head office, this HQ organization is not actually out there to kind of to undermine them, but is actually there to help them, and the benefits, as they often are as development officers become more mature, are considerably greater than the disadvantage.
Sheila, do you want to add to that?
Absolutely agree with John's comments. I think, you know, it's about trying to show value and trying to show, you know, the benefits and successes you can assist with, so that, you know, the value you can add to that. You know, it's quite common in universities for academics to want to protect and keep the information that they have with their stakeholders and the alumni that they have engaged with through their own connections. And, you know, we have to work closely with them and just show that by interacting with us, we can provide expertise and skill sets that they might have, and get them the successes that, you know, ultimately they'd like to have, maybe in a quicker time. So that's probably what I can add to that.
Thank you.
Sheila's done this successfully in 2 or 3 institutions, so she's someone whose advice is worth having.
Excellent. I would also direct this question to Liza, who I did not yet introduce to you, because she's actually our expert for the stewardship session, but she does have some very valuable insight on this that she would like to share with us. Please, Liza.
So I actually created the centralized advancement operation for Singapore Healthcare Group here in Singapore. And I think one of the chief reasons why we were successful integrating 7 different institute advancement offices is because our head said it was going to happen. So if you haven't created that conversation from the top down, nothing is going to work. So if it's only you saying, "Hey, I'm a good guy. I'm really a valuable team player. I'm an ethical fundraiser," that's not going to get it done. You have to have the input from the top down to make sure that everybody in the organization understands why you're creating a central advancement office. If that hasn't happened yet, you're going to be 2 or 3 or 4 years creating that buy-in and creating those relationships.
That's a very good advice, actually, Liza. Thank you very much. I would also encourage the attendees, if they would like to share some of their experience, to share them with us in the chat, and then I will share them with the conference. Maybe one last question before we go over to our first break. I really would love to know where the panelists or anybody actually who takes part in this conference think that researchers waste too much time in their research. I would really love to know, where do you think the elements are the most useful elements to concentrate your research on, or the other way around, what is not very useful to do? Maybe I start with Sheila this time.
I think identification is something that happens through fundraisers or the people that are having the conversations out there. So I think the most value that I would see in my research people is actually in the ones that are doing the quantifying and a bit of the due diligence. So, checking up and making sure that the people that have been identified actually have some of that affinity, that ability. I mean, when I started fundraising, I always was told about LIA. It's the linkage, interest, and ability that someone has in the organisation, and that's always stuck in my head. And I think that we can always identify people, but it's the other aspect that we need to get experts like researchers doing, which is that stuff around affinity, due diligence, absolutely, but also looking at what is their ability, and sometimes that's information that you just can't get in the public domain. So you need to get the experts who can find the information for you.
Thank you. Edward, do you want to comment on that?
No, I never find you spend too much time on prospect research. It's part of our investment, I would say. Without a good database, without knowing our offer list, without knowing who I'm going after, without all the information to support, I don't think we can have a very high, we are not very likely to success in our asking. So I always consider prospect research as the very important elements in our preparation to do our fundraising. In particular, we are talking about major gift. Without information about our prospect major givers, what can we do?
Sure.
Yeah, so that's why I don't think it's waste a lot of time. It's an investment.
Thank you. Excellent. With this, I would ring the bell for the break so that everybody can get up and have tea or coffee, or I think in Australia, you're about to have lunch right now. And we will be back in 10 minutes to speak about cultivation. And I will introduce you after the break to Frank O'Prey, who's our expert on this topic. See you all in 10 minutes. Welcome back, everybody, to the IFAB2021. I hope you had enough time to have a short break. There was a very interesting discussion we had on prospect research. Thank you, everybody, for participating. I am pleased now to introduce you to Frank O'Prey. Frank is our expert today, and he will talk on cultivation. He has 25 years of experiences in consulting national and international schools. And prior to that, he was the director of development of the Wesley College in Melbourne. At this college, for the work at this college, he actually received the inaugural award as Fundraiser of the Year from the Association of Development and Alumni Professionals in Education, which is today known as the Educate Plus. Currently, Frank is the principal of Washington Services and assists international schools and universities to meet their fundraising targets. They have clients, they are based in Melbourne and Manila and have consulted over 50 educational clients around Asia. Frank, welcome back to the IFAB. I think you need to turn on your camera, please. And then I will hand over to you.
Thank you, Anna, and good afternoon and good morning to all. It's a delight to be able to join you on this extremely innovative program, and thank you for the opportunity to do so. My orientation, as you just heard, is going to be very much from the educational standpoint, which is my background, and I was therefore a wee bit relieved in a sense to discover in looking at the survey results that something like 70% of those online with us today are in fact from an educational institution. So there's a sense of comfort there. But additionally, that survey indicated that something in the region of 80% have got 5 years or more experience in this major fundraising game. So I'm going to try as best I can to stay away from any sense of fundraising 101 and share with you thoughts and strategies on how to better advance the cultivation process in a fairly rigorous and, can I say, country by country way, and we'll come to that in a moment. Alex is driving my slides. The next slide, please, Alex. Here's an outline of where I'd like to go today. We'll talk generally about education and networking, then some strategies and examples from across the region. But remembering that countries are so different, particularly across Asia. India is not China. The Philippines is not Thailand, and we need to think about individual countries. So I want to walk you through a group of 8 countries that I've chosen and illustrate thoughts and concepts bearing on the cultivation process relative to those countries. I want to comment, as you would expect, on circumstances during and post-COVID and some trends and opportunities, if you like, that seem to be emerging from that. And then finally, before we go to the panel discussion, to reflect on all of that and try and distill from it some of the key lessons that we would have learned. Alex, thank you. Well, this business of cultivation, I'm absolutely delighted, I might say, to be following on Valentina, because I'm very much of the view that research has to get in ahead of cultivation. And I think, therefore, the sequencing that Chaplain York put together, that it be research and then cultivation and then stewardship and around again, is entirely appropriate. That's certainly been my experience over time. But as I've gone through the region over the years, as you've just heard a bit about that, my orientation has been very much on seeking to do cultivation from a business standpoint. It's all well and good to dwell on the time of an alum or even a parent for that matter at the institution in question, but times move on and these people are now actively involved in business in their home country. And the more we can advance our cultivation process on a business-to-business basis, the quicker we'll get to the sort of result that we're looking for. Alongside that, of course, are the family and personal interests that accompany that, and those need to be factored in as well. The closer one can get to the business setting, to the family setting, then the more effective we can be in our cultivation activities. I'm always intrigued that certainly the Chinese approach in Asia is very much one of giving back to roots. It's something that just permeates the whole approach to support, to philanthropy, and so on. I happen, just as a matter of coincidence, to be on my second read through the autobiography of Li Kaoshun, the Hong Kong businessman and philanthropist. And just the other evening, I came across the section where, on his dying bed, his father, in the depths of World War II in 1943 in Hong Kong, said to the young Li Kaoshun, "Don't forget who you are, don't forget your roots." It's absolutely the experience that I've had, that is part of the giving motivation. We need to bear that in mind as we go with our cultivation. Likewise, in talking to alums, parents, and any other supporters we can find in our home country or beyond, the sharing of the institution's vision and plan developments is vital. And along with that, where possible, an introduction to the institutional senior management, principal of the school, the vice-chancellor of the university, senior researchers, and the like. Those are key parts of how to entice our candidates to come along this cultivation journey with us and be respectful of the leadership of those institutions. Preparation is all important. I don't just mean preparation from the standpoint of looking back into the institution and exploring the time of the alum there, but rather preparation relative to prevailing social, economic, regulatory circumstances in the company in question. I was once invited to talk to a case conference in Hong Kong, and I said a bit flippantly, I suppose, hands up all those who read a novel on the plane coming here for this conference this week. And more than half the audience put their hand up, and for that I admonished them, and I said, well, look, when I come to such things, I prefer to be reading The Economist and Bloomberg so that I'm prepared, I'm aware of current circumstances. That's the game we're in. That's what we should be doing, in my view. Likewise, preparation takes us into the area of cultural, political, and even religious sensitivity, if you like, so that we can not make obvious mistakes. We can relate more carefully to the audience that we have, and that the cultivation can proceed much more successfully. Additionally, I was in on Dave Shepherd's session on Tuesday, this same session, the European section, and he made a very valid point, I think, which was avoid jargon, avoid wording that is known to us, but perhaps not to the audience in question, and ensure that what we talk about in our offices doesn't necessarily filter out through into the marketplace. It's a great danger if we do that. But at the end of the day, the really fundamental task of this cultivation process, in my view, is one of listening. We are there to listen at the outset and to take on board the messages we hear, to translate them into how best we can be a conduit to the hoped for gift between that individual and the entity that we represent. Listening is all important. We're not there to preach our story. We're there to listen and learn. Alex, thank you. So what sort of strategies across the region might we be thinking about? Again, I say the importance of research, and what Valentina had to say about that is absolutely vital. Now, there's an example of jargon that we should not use. Moves management is something we talk about, but please do not use that phrase out there in the marketplace. If people get the idea that we're representing the CIA in some sort of moves management venture, then all will be lost before we've even begun. I find it very useful at this early stage to be talking to individuals about how they can help in the planning. In other words, seek their advice. The gift will follow, but advice at the early stage is all important. Sometimes my experience has been, if you draw them sufficiently into the project from that early stage, when it comes to the ask, that proposition is how much do you want, not how much are you prepared to give. So involvement in planning, seeking advice is all important. Remembering all the while that what we're doing in terms of major gift cultivation is probably plugging into a continuum of annual giving within the institution, perhaps project gifts as they proceed, and even planned giving as well if there's a legacy or bequest program underway. This has to sit alongside the reality of those programs ongoing. And the hope is, of course, that if our candidates are participating in any or all of those, then the cultivation for a subsequent major gift will be that much easier. Alumni networking, COVID permitting, of course, will be going on. But again, I say, if this can have a strong business orientation, then it will be much more effective. It's always amazed me at the business linkages that alums make at such functions. They come along as an interested party in what the institution is offering, but often they find people who they do business with. Sometimes they don't even know they're of the same organisation. So business to business is a critical part of this, and be it virtually or face to face, that's to be encouraged. It may be that in certain places the use of interpreters is prudent and appropriate, but be aware that in some circumstances it could well be seen as insulting if we're suggesting that a candidate's English is not up to scratch and we're going to bring along an interpreter to help us along. Then that may be helpful, but it may be counterproductive. So just be aware that we need to be careful with our use of those people. And a final thing, and again, Dave Shepherd made mention of this, I'll draw on his experience. Ensure there are people on the ground who can continue on the good work after we've gone back to our offices in Australia, Canada, the US, or wherever. These people will continue the good work provided they're adequately briefed, they're enthusiastic, and they're influencers. Those are vital people to have working with us. Thanks, Alex. Some individual country comments, because as I said, the countries are vastly different place to place. And I start with Indonesia, not just because it's adjacent to Australia, but there's some 280 million there with burgeoning wealth, vast wealth, in fact. Much of it's hidden, much of it flying under the radar. We won't get into the tax implications of that, but it is a strong, vibrant, growing, wealthy country, and we need to pay regard to that in the cultivation we do. Additionally, it's worthwhile remembering that there's strong affection for the US and its tertiary education system, so there's need to identify and cultivate in accordance with that. Oftentimes, those at the top of the wealth industry within Indonesia look primarily to the US rather than to other places. We have to factor our thinking into that. I'll give you two quick examples to my experience there. One, because I was living there for a little while and came to know various people who'd had contact with various institutions. There was one who had attended Carey Grammar School in Melbourne, where I worked for a while, but that school had taken no time to get to know him, notwithstanding the fact that his family were in the top 10 wealth-wise in Indonesia. An opportunity was lost. The philanthropy he gave went in the direction of a subsequent US institution that he attended, and Carey never quite recovered from that. Conversely, there was a family that I got to know well who'd had 2 or 3 family members as boarders at Wesley, and by virtue of getting to know their businesses and talking, as I said before, with them on a business-to-business basis as best I could, knowing and understanding the businesses they were in, getting an appreciation of the competition they faced and the dynamics of their businesses, I was able to bring them along and bring them back to the college. And to cut a long story short, that translated into a gift of a couple of $1 million in due course out of gratitude for what the school had done for their family over time. Alex, thank you. In Singapore, it goes without saying that political influence is all important. I come back to Li Kaohsiung, and many of you would know that he made a substantial donation to the fledgling Singapore Management University back in the early 2000s. And that was occasioned by that university and its management engaging Lee Kuan Yew, then Prime Minister, to engage with Li Kaohsiung and get him involved in that project. Political influence cannot be understated in that town. Gifts of gratitude in the instance that I have knowledge of was relative to special care for disadvantaged children. That is a strong giving motivational factor in Singapore. This particular family I got to know had a mildly autistic child who came on to Wesley in Melbourne, and a gift of something in the region of $1 million resulted from the good work that that school did in looking after that child. Gratitude was there. And additionally, I said before, in your research, be aware of regulatory and taxation considerations. There was a time now past, it existed from around about 2010 to 2018, when there was tax deductibility incentives to the level of 400% operating in Singapore, whereby if donors subject to Singapore income tax gave to those specified entities, then that sort of level of deductibility would result. That, I would have to say, made it extremely difficult for an Australian institution which was offering far less, if any, deductibility at all, to get alongside that and make an impact. So be aware of the local circumstances and how they might impact on the sort of cultivation that you're seeking to undertake. Alex, thank you. Coming to Malaysia, this is a country of powerful foundations, the likes of the Kwok family and others. Some of you online will know of that experience. It's a place of political giving in the extreme, political intrigue in the extreme, some would say, and the influence of corporates as you do your cultivation is in need of being understood, not least of which the oil and gas and agricultural segments, which are strong in that country. Coming then, Alex, to Thailand. Of all the countries I've been in and out of, I think internationalism is alive and well in Thailand, more so than most. And as you would know, certainly in the independent school, international school sector, private ownership is a strong feature. A recent example of that is that the founder of United World College Thailand in Phuket, who developed a school, has recently granted the equity of that to the school community, the local community. And it just illustrates the fact that philanthropy can flow through and have a benefit to the surrounding community. Moving on to China, a place of regulatory considerations and regulatory concern at the moment, I suspect, for those of you who are dealing there. Giving is oftentimes for influence. It's generated by the extreme wealth generation that was talked about earlier today. I think John mentioned that. But all the while, there's been an issue the University of Melbourne has been particularly conscious of this, of the ability to get philanthropic dollars out of China and into the recipient country. Be aware of these considerations. Make sure that you're across the regulatory considerations. And now that, of course, that we've got the Evergrande Group looming large as a likely dampener on the stock exchange there, just what impact that will have on philanthropic giving remains to be seen. Switching to the Philippines, some of you will know that the so-called 40 or is it 60 families still wield huge influence there. Many of them date back to Spanish times, in fact. So it's old money that is influential in that country. But the good news is, from a cultivation and philanthropic point of view, is that there's tremendous familiarity with the US style of giving and, in fact, with US educational institutions. So that means that the stories we tell about philanthropy and the interest we have in cultivating it strike a chord with many we talk to there. Corporate donations are a strong element of the giving there, and much of that relates to those 40 families who continue on in that vein. And in my view is the very presence of the Asia Development Bank and its philanthropic role throughout the region based in Manila, as it is, plays a useful role in the understanding of philanthropy, and that can help our cause and our cultivation there. Coming to Hong Kong, talking of locations of interest and perhaps of concern, some of these issues are a wee bit historic, but the Jockey Club there, as Edward would attest, has been a substantial donor philanthropically over the decades. The Canadian and Australian schools owe a great deal of their existence in that marketplace to philanthropy that's flowed through the Jockey Club. The message, therefore, is know the local market, know the who's who within such organisations as a possible foreign investor, and ensure that that is factored into the thinking and the planning. The impact in that town of foreign corporations and, of course, of expats is considerable, not least of which is in the finance sector, as we know, and one needs to do one's research, as I was suggesting earlier, relative to those sorts of factors. One needs to be able to participate in the conversations that surround financial and investment characteristics in that town if you're to be useful and worthwhile in the cultivation process with potential donors. Changes afoot. May well be that the demand for international school places is not as strong as it once was, and that's something to watch out for. Moving on quickly to India, there is huge reverence, I should say, for institutions there. That should factor through the cultivation activities that we undertake. Networking, likewise, is an important part. Coming on to post-COVID considerations, Alex, we've all done online reunions, career planning, in my case, some estate planning, webinars. These will continue. We've now learnt that they have an effective role to play, and I see that I suspect we're going to have a hybrid situation as we go. In some cases, there's already interest from international schools to think in terms of offering tertiary opportunities beyond year 12. I'm presently in conversation with some schools who are entertaining that, recognising that online learning is now part of the equation, and it could be that those schools could start to offer, through tertiary providers, opportunities for their graduates coming through year 12 to stay with that school in a different but continuing way. Thank you, Alex. So just to conclude, here are some of the key lessons that I hope we've touched on. Use business as a lever is a strong recommendation of mine. Get to know the families, associate yourselves with them. Use research, both local and institutional, particularly from a business and political standpoint. Seek advice initially. The gifts will follow, as I said. Ensure that your institutional leadership is well introduced and is there, bringing its influence to bear. And critically, when you leave and go back, maintain momentum, be that through your agents who you leave on the ground or a continuing role from thereafter. And from there, we go on to our panel session.
Thank you very much, Frank, and thank you for this valuable insight into different countries' individual situations. I would love to give you a break, but I just have a short question. Could you elaborate a little bit more on your business-to-business approach? Do you suggest that major gift fundraising should have a better tendency to work with corporates, their various corporate social responsibility programs, or do you suggest that we should target business owners? May you just give a little bit more information about this idea?
Yes, it's sufficient for a whole session, I'm sorry. What I'm really getting at is the opportunity to better understand the businesses, the business sectors in which our alums and others operate, so that when one goes into a country and has appointments with potential major donors who are now being subjected to cultivation from our own institution, if they're in the bike manufacturing trade, become an overnight expert on bike manufacturing.
I see.
Spend some time Googling and understanding the marketplace, so that when you first sit down with them, you share that knowledge and that understanding. And all of a sudden, someone who you've not met before says to you, "Good grief, Mr. Opera, you seem to be well informed about the business I'm in." You don't tell them that you're only one screen ahead of them on Google and you only discovered this yesterday, but it's just an extraordinarily valuable door opener and credibility gainer. That's the point I'm making.
So it goes back to what we already said also due the Prospect research session, that we need to have as much information as possible about the donors, about the people we would like to approach for a major gift. Thank you very much for this clarification, Frank. Please do not hesitate to ask any questions for the panel. I wonder if one of the panelists just would like to add generally to Frank's presentation right now.
I'll jump in if I may, and no one else has beat me to it, Anna. And really just building on your question to Frank and Frank's response, and actually my own reflecting on it when he was speaking, I think my observation would be, I don't think I've been involved in any major gift relationship in Asia, and I mean Asia rather than Asia Pacific, where the donor has not been in some way connected with a business, being a business person, in other words. And I mean that reflects the kind of socioeconomic structure of wealth in Asia. I think wealth in Asia has largely been built up through commerce and business. There's not old money as there is in Europe, or even to some extent in Australia and New Zealand, and it's not landed money as it is in Australia and New Zealand. It's people, often several generations of business person, but their characteristics are entrepreneurs, and being able to engage with them in conversations about businesses, as Frank points out, is a great way of developing rapport. And also events in Asia are often seen as networking opportunities around business. And just as a final observation, back to your question, Anna, about corporate corporate philanthropy and CSR, I think it's important to realize that much family philanthropy in Asia is actually it's kind of parallel or analogous to corporate social responsibility, because most businesses in Asia are family owned. So they run their philanthropic programs, if you will, through their businesses. So you may well be talking, or at least you need to be aware of any corporate social responsibility programs that their businesses have, and any legislation around CSR that might be applicable, as it is in countries. It's unlikely for us out of those countries to be able to obtain funds through CSR, because most CSR regulations and CSR incentives are based on giving back into their own communities. But you know, they almost certainly will have a CSR lens, or at least part of the conversation may involve a CSR lens, because family and business are very closely entwined in much of Asia.
Yeah, we do see this a lot in Hong Kong, especially. But before directing this question to Edward, I wanted to know about Nicole's point of view in terms of the business-to-business approach in cultivation. How do you do that? And do you have any examples to share with us?
As in picking up on the business-to-business approach that Frank was talking about, those business connections?
Yes.
Yeah. You know, it's interesting because I was just thinking then as well about how you really can't often unpick what is the major giver from the business they operate. And we, as an arts organisation, especially when we do exhibitions and festivals and things like that, are often having those discussions around, is this a gift? Is this a corporate sponsorship, or is this both? And how do we, you know, approach those things? In terms of on the Gold Coast, I mentioned briefly before, we're a destination, and I mentioned that we have a lot of people that are interested in investing in the cultural capital of our city. So they may not be people whose they have connections here, but whose main residences are here necessarily, but they are often people who are invested in the Gold Coast, which might look like in terms of property development and all of those different things. And so then just picking up as well on Frank's point, really great point within his presentation around who do we engage in our organisation to liaise with those people, or is it somebody outside of our organisation? For example, at HOTA we have a really great champion in the mayor of our city. So he's able to, for a number of Australian people, they may be familiar with the Gold Coast mayor. He's a very dynamic person, but he's also a really great champion, a businessman, and able to connect us with those people that may be interested in the investment in our region specifically.
Interesting, really interesting. Edward, do you want to add to that? Because the Hong Kong scenery is very well known for the corporate philanthropy, right? And I would like you, if you can, add to John's comment also on the link of the family philanthropists and as a business owner.
Okay, generally speaking, I don't find any major differences in cultivation because of COVID. The only change is the way we meet our prospects from face-to-face to online nowadays. But the process itself, I can't see any significant change. Only that, of course, most of the people of foundation or corporations defer their decision to give. But the process itself, I think, is more or less the same. In terms of the relationship between, foundation and corporations, right?
Yeah, the corporate social responsibility sector, corporate philanthropists, and the family owners.
Okay, I think the corporate foundation are more easy in some way to cultivate, because, as you said, as all of you said, because they have the they have the CSR thing. They need to do something proactively to show their good citizenship. So they are, from my experience or through my observation, is more easy compared with family foundation or individual foundations in terms of cultivation.
Thank you. We have talked during the prospect research about this gain in wealth in China, Japan, and South Korea. And there is a question from Clarice, who would like to know if you have any advice and experience on building chapters in the Japanese market. So from what I understand, she would like to know how to engage in major gift fundraising in the Japanese market. Frank, I think that was not part of your presentation. Do you have any experience on this specific country?
I'm not strong on the Japanese market, but principles hold as they do in other places, in my view. In other words, discover the background, discover the motivation, find key points of intersection and capitalize on those. I don't know that that's any different from many of the other markets that we talk about. Along the way, it's a matter as the representative of the institution to build that credibility that I was referring to, and go away from those conversations with the confidence of the candidate. In fact, there was a circumstance in Indonesia where I was all but cast as the prospective business agent back in Melbourne, and there were 2 or 3 business opportunities that Indonesian entity was pursuing, and they sought my advice, which had nothing to do with education. It was in other areas, but because the relationship had developed to the point and the confidence was there, I was drawn into being all but an investment spotter, if you like, which some might argue is a conflict of interest. I didn't quite see it that way, but that's an expression of the fact that if you approach it, and as I say again, on a business-to-business basis, that can lead to all sorts of more thorough cultivation.
John, do you want to add to that?
Not so much adding to what Frank said, but just wanting to clarify something that I said and that Edward commented on. I'm not suggesting, certainly for most of us that are, for example, in Australia and New Zealand, that you're going to benefit from corporate social responsibility programs from family-owned businesses in Asia, because those are usually constrained to and prescribed to giving or contributing to things in those economies. But if you're dealing with, which is normally the case in any case, the owners, the families behind those organizations, then first of all, you will probably find some of your time spent talking with, and the gatekeepers might well be, or you're referred to people who sit within the kind of corporate area, the corporate social responsibility area, because the point I was making is that the distinction between philanthropy and CSR programs in the minds of the owners and the way that they approach them is probably converges, and certainly when it comes to handling their donations. I mean, the responsibility for the mechanics, the financial arrangements, and so on, are likely to be directed to their business staff, who are likely to be their CSR staff. So, understanding the language, not being surprised when you find yourself dealing with the corporate social responsibility department, is important. But the money is really coming because you have got this personal relationship with the owners or the owner's family of that business.
Thank you. That actually brings me to my next question, which I would like to direct to Sheila to begin with, which is about strategic directions. From what I hear is that it is not necessarily so different from country to country, or be it a national fundraising, major fundraising endeavor, or an international one, in terms of cultivating the donor. Do you have any advice on the best strategic directions to take, or how to best, or maybe an example of an integrated approach to cultivating these donors?
I think, Anna, for a university, it's a bit different. So, you know, at a university, we are driven by the strategic direction of the university, and you know, we're normally talking to alumni who, you know, are either aware or you have bought in already to that strategic direction. So it's more about aligning, you know, and trying to listen to what these donors or prospective donors are saying that aligns with what a university is wanting to achieve. And every university has different objectives and strategic directions. And, you know, since COVID, a few of those have been quite fluid, and we've had to rapidly change to do different things than we had originally planned to. So, you know, those conversations with those donors is probably more aligned to what the organisation, like the university, is wanting to achieve, but trying to listen and understand that fits in with the donors that we are speaking to.
Can you give us some examples of how you managed to do that during the pandemic, on the online discussion with the technology? Can you give us some practical examples of what you actually do to cultivate your donors?
So practically, we do a lot of webinars. So we have particular focus for those particular areas, particular projects. We've got a number of our academics who are very high profile when it comes to the pandemic, reporting, you know, a part of the Prime Minister's advisory group. So we try and profile some of those lead academics, because that's obviously the pandemic and COVID is of interest at the moment. We are currently undertaking consultation on our 2040, our new strategic direction for Otago. So we are setting up some virtual focus groups around that with key individuals. So we are trying to engage as much as we can virtually, given that we can't be face-to-face with them, which is what we originally planned. You know, Zoom is our new best friend. So, you know, we are structuring a lot of those conversations. So we are trying to get a perspective from these people and making sure that they feel valued and they are consulted with.
Edward, can I ask you, in Hong Kong, the way how donors are cultivated was very much based on events, face-to-face meetings, activities, etc. How did the organizations in Hong Kong come over the cultivation challenges of major donors through the pandemic now?
Okay. As I said, there's not much difference now and before pandemic. Of course, we no longer have much events, large-scale events, but in terms of the face-to-face, very personalized connection and the cultivation, it only, I would say, it's only shifting from a face-to-face mode to an online mode or over the phone. So essentially, the process itself doesn't make much change over the last 2 years or around 2 years. Only how we did it changed, but not the things itself, not the cultivation itself. So without much events, then I would say if doing it properly without a big event will make the cultivation more personal, more one-on-one, instead of through a big event with a lot of people there. So I think yes, this is what I observed over the last 2 years since the pandemic.
So I think the impact in this case that we could see from the pandemic is actually that major donor cultivation has become less expensive on the organization's budget.
Yes, I would say so.
What would you think how we continue in the future? Where is the tendency to go after the pandemic, hoping that it's not going to last for that long anymore? Do you think organizations will stay with this new approach to cultivation over technological means, or do we go back to how it has been before?
I think
also with the experience that it apparently does work quite well without how we have done it before.
I think it will go to the hybrid rate instead of going back to the totally face-to-face way. We will still do a lot online through Zoom or other platform. But I think nowadays in Hong Kong, just in Hong Kong, for example, the pandemic is more contained nowadays. So I see that there's more activities nowadays. Some donors or prospects or organizations start to meet in person again. So in the future or after COVID, I think both online and offline will go simultaneously. And but for sure, never go back to offline only.
John, can I, oh, sorry, Frank, do you want to add on that? I just see that you raised your hand.
Sorry, my hope is that we will go to a hybrid model. Obviously, there will be a continuation of Zoom. It's found its way into our psyche. But let's hope that we can get to a degree face-to-face. The greatest issue that I have has been the loss of serendipitous conversations. Those chance conversations at events where we're meeting face-to-face have been denied us. And my view is that that's led to a huge waste of opportunity when we just don't have the chance serendipitous encounters which lead to all sorts of interesting outcomes.
Thank you. John, I wanted to ask you, with your experience in a variety of different countries, and you always put forward the point that obviously once the major gift fundraiser leaves the country, goes back home into his office or into his institution, there is a really need to have allies on the ground to continue the cultivation and to continue working with the donor. Did you see throughout the pandemic that these people have been given more flexibility or have taken on more space in the cultivation process?
Unfortunately, I can't really answer that because during the pandemic, a lot of the consulting work that I was doing, which related to working with people overseas, necessarily came to a stop. So I haven't had the experience which perhaps Sheila has of maintaining those major gift relationships or donor prospect relationships with people overseas. So I'm sorry, but I'm the wrong person to answer that question.
Well, in that case, Sheila, do you want to take on?
I don't think we're going to. Sorry, Anna, did you ask how we do things differently, or I've just got confused between you and John?
I specifically asked actually about if you do major gift fundraising in a country where you're not based, right? And then you go there and then you leave again, go back to your home country. So you still have a network who does do cultivation on the major donor. Does these people have been given more flexibility, or have they taken on more space in the cultivation process throughout the pandemic?
I think it's probably a bit of both, but New Zealand's always been a long way from anywhere. We are close to Asia, but still it's a major plane ride, so we're used to that distance anyway. I think we are giving more space because people are, there's a lot more going on in people's lives. The distinction between work and home spaces is blurring, so people are working from home. So we're just trying to be a bit more flexible in those conversations, but also understanding that we still have to try and move things along. So we are looking forward to getting back to the one-on-one. We are still planning for that. But I think Edward's right about it will be probably more hybrid, because we will have to continue to do more online with certain populations. But for us, engaging face-to-face, you can't beat that. That really is what you need to aim for. But absolutely, flexibility, giving people more time, And, but trying to keep up, it's a balancing act, trying to still keep up with that relationship and that engagement, acknowledging that a lot of people are going through really difficult times. We've not contacted our UK chapter and our UK board of directors for our trust for probably 6 months, because we've been trying to leave them alone because they were going through a tough time. But we've been trying to engage much more closely with our US ones, even though the president of our US he's been working from home for a year and a half now. So it's acknowledging all of that different kind of perspective and being aware of that when you're having those conversations.
Excellent. Liza, I think you have something to add on this.
Yeah, I wanted to just follow up what Sheila said. I think it's really important that we do recognize individual countries are approaching COVID differently. So our Chinese chapter, of which we have 49, were much more aggressive in meeting earlier than anyone else that we worked with. So our Chinese chapters came together and made multiple gifts of gloves and masks to the institution. And then started to cultivate amongst themselves for major gifts. So I'll talk a little bit about this later in my presentation. But when you give the autonomy to your volunteers to to build themselves as they see fit, that's when you give them the power. And in particular, our Chinese chapters really took it and ran to the great benefit of NTU.
Very valuable input. Thank you very much. It just leads me actually to our break, and then we will continue with the stewardship presentation of Liza. So please go ahead, have a little of a break, a breathe, and come back in 10 minutes. Welcome back, everybody, to the IFAB2021, this time for our session on stewardship. And I'm pleased to introduce you to Liza, who I've already met now throughout the first couple of sessions. And Liza, I apologize that I should have done the introductions actually much earlier. But please meet Liza Boffen-Jordanov. She is an internationally known advancement professional with over 23 years of experience in a range of organizations, including the Nanyang Technological University, the Indian Institute of Technology in Bombay, the George Washington University, the Purdue University, and her alma mater, the Trinity University in Washington. She was, until most recently, the Chief Development Officer and Executive Director of the University Advancement Office of the Nanyang Technological University in Singapore. She was the first one to have attained the Certified Fundraising Executive credential in Singapore. She is an AFP Master Teacher and has taught the annual giving model for the AFP Essential of Fundraising Certificate program. She has held numerous case conference sessions and was a member of the Singapore Charity Code Refinement Committee in 2009 and 2010. And I think just before in the chat, she also shared with us her knowledge on tax deductibility in Singapore, which was very much appreciated, Liza. With this, I hand over to you and to our next session on stewardship.
So I am really excited to be with you all again this year. I was one of the inaugural speakers last year, so IFAB has a place close to my heart. I think one of the great things about this conversation we're going to have today is the fact that we're kind of seeing before, during, and maybe post-COVID of what stewardship is like for, in particular, major gift prospects. One of the things I am going to take you through is looking at annual giving. You kind of heard Anna talk about my love of annual giving, my love of data, how we can convert some of our annual giving prospects and donors into major gift donors. So that'll be through the course of this presentation. But as I'm talking about some things, if the connection isn't clear in the beginning, I'll make sure that it will be by the end. So let me just introduce a little bit about NTU. So we are a relatively large, research-intensive public university, roughly 33,000 undergrads and postgrad students. We are the #1 young university in the world. Being a young university, that means we don't have a lot of alumni, ingrained wealth, people who haven't come to the institution 2 or 3 generations. We're really talking about people who are first generation in their family to come to university, but also the alumni are their first to really be in that realm for NTU. So building up the conversations between and amongst alumni is incredibly important. So one of the things that I'd like to specifically talk about is Singapore, the way that we are really a melting pot of cultures. So Chinese, Malay, Indian, North American, South American, there are so many different ethnic groups in Singapore that really have touched the lives of the larger culture. So one of the things that we look at in particular when it comes to stewardship is focusing on our calendar. So I think a lot of people, when it comes to stewardship, they do have a lot of opportunities around holidays. One of the great things in Singapore is we have national holidays on most of these festival days. So it's a great opportunity for us to make use of people's time off to be able to do individual stewardship, particularly when we're talking about major gifts. So let me just I'll share with you some of the pieces that we use with our major gift donors and with some of our annual giving donors that we're hoping to cultivate. The donor stewardship piece that you'll see here is actually for Lunar New Year, which features 4 different iconic buildings on NTU's campus. It was given as a package gift along with 2 mandarin oranges. So what happened is, at the beginning of COVID, we had some challenges with doing in-person events. And what we found is people were really just hoping for some sort of contact, some sort of, we know that you're still there. And so what ended up happening is the majority of these were given virtually. So there was a Zoom call, people held up the oranges, we did our greetings, and then we hand delivered them through a courier. So again, from what we used to do, which I'll show you a photo a little bit later of some of the more higher priced stewardship opportunities for some of our major donors, to something that really had a significant meaning during COVID. So we did celebrate, Chinese New Year, Mid-Autumn Festival, Hari Raya, Diwali, Christmas, and New Year. So these were really significant times in Singapore when we as a community gathered, but we also made an attempt with our donors and with our prospects to reach out and make sure that they felt well stewarded. So again, these were all pieces that we had both virtually and we were able to give physical copies. So the piece that you'll see on the right was actually accompanied by a paper drawing that was done by a student group on campus. So again, making sure that the gifts that you're giving, if you give gifts, are relevant to your institution and have some resonance with the holiday, with the donor. So again, featuring our buildings, making sure that every piece that goes out has our logo on it. So for those institutions that don't have a logo policy, you might want to look at some examples of how institutions make sure that pieces look similar, so that the logo, the branding feels the same, whether or not I'm getting, a $15 appeal or a thank you note for a $50,000 gift. So let me just share with you some of the pieces of what we've done before. So this, the case that you see in the upper right-hand corner is actually a gift that we gave out my first year at NTU. And it was roughly around $20 to put this box together. Again, we leverage our relationship in China, and you'll see the red card that is on top of the oranges. So these were hand signed by the president and went out to our top 150 donors. What that allowed us to do, again, pre-COVID, was take this beautiful box to our donors, to their corporate offices, to their foundation offices, that it was then displayed with the card, with the signature from the president, as well as the oranges. So this was a great opportunity for us to showcase our Chinese heritage, to really give an impression that NTU was taking the relationship seriously. So one of the things that I'd like to talk about, and what you'll see threaded through this conversation, is that we show our gratitude in many different ways to our donors. We want them to feel as appreciated as we feel grateful for their gift. So the other piece, sorry, and it looks very fuzzy. I'm not sure why it's so fuzzy, but the early bird specials for the senior class gift. The reason I put it in this presentation about major gift fundraising is the fact that our students, we're creating this culture of philanthropy for our students. So we want to make sure that they understand where those bursaries, where their scholarships came from, but also get them in the habit of giving a gift. So one of the great things about being in a large organization is we have a relatively significant budget that we're able to give to get. So again, this is a little bit controversial, but one of the great advantages of having a large student body is we have great student ambassadors who are able to model not just the t-shirts, but model this ethos of the culture of philanthropy, the culture of giving on campus. So what the senior class gift allows the students to do is, if they make an early gift, they get a movie ticket, they get photos at graduation, they actually get a special pin that they wear at commencement, and they get a special t-shirt. So again, what we're doing is creating this culture of philanthropy from very early on. What we found is parents want this gift too. So which opens up a whole new opportunity for us when we're talking about parent and grandparent giving. Because as Frank mentioned, as Valentina mentioned, the idea of transformational gifts coming from an experience of having a student who has helped and felt fulfilled from their experience is really what we're after, particularly at an institution like NTU. So I just wanted to share really quickly, and you'll see this come back a little bit later, is some of the pieces that we work on for our faculty and staff campaign. So I found this photo actually in one of my old files, but this is what it actually turned out into. I think everybody probably knows what this is, but it's a bubble tea holder. And I gave is our faculty and staff campaign. So it actually turned out really well. The piece on the right is actually a button. So what we did is, again, most people put this on their bubble tea holder. But if your office hit 100% faculty and staff giving, then your entire team received this special commemorative button. And what we found is when these were made available to different teams at NTU, we had more and more teams actually compete to get to 100% giving. So we're incredibly lucky that this had resonance on our campus. And you'll see that turnover a little bit later in this presentation. So again, the piece on the left is another part of our faculty and staff donation campaign. One of the things I'd like to point out is to be as aware and to be as local as you possibly can in some of your appeals. And that's seen on both of these pieces. The Christmas hamper gift on the right is mainly a stewardship gift for our major and principal gift level prospects and donors. The piece on the left is something that we did, again, for the give to get. Make a $5 donation, get a Kampong snack. This actually went over huge. We had no idea. We did this kind of as an A/B test. And we took about 1,000 staff and we did this test. And then we did a different test with another 1,000 people. And what we found is this was a huge draw for our faculty and staff. They were really, really keen to get this kind of nostalgic feel, which is what we then reflected in our Christmas hamper gift that year for our major and principal gifts. So let me talk a little bit about taking this idea of the gifts we receive. So not only when people give do we get a monetary gift, but what are the other pieces that pull into that feeling of philanthropy? I wanted to show you just a really quick kind of down and dirty look at how we do some A/B testing when it comes to annual gifts, and then how that filters into major gift fundraising. So obviously we want to increase donor participation rates. We obviously want to know the number of prospects who then become donors. We want to see that increase as well. And we want to see improved donor satisfaction. So how are we able to actually look at these metrics? We held a Halloween event for our faculty and staff and our student appeals. And this was, again, an A/B testing. What we found for this particular appeal is the graduation giving class. We had 74 participants, but we had this huge number of non-graduation giving people who felt that the campaign resonated with them. And it resulted in 437 pledges, which I think, again, the idea that we can take a particular event appeal, that again, this wasn't a low cost event. This wasn't a low cost appeal. To really turn it around in terms of pledges, I think was pretty exciting for us. The other was, again, a very local movie appreciation night around a movie film festival in Singapore, again, pre-COVID. So these were all opportunities for us to really start talking about the culture of philanthropy and how we steward gifts well with students and with our faculty. So that was all pre-COVID. So let's talk about what donor stewardship actually looks like now post-COVID. So let me speak specifically about NTU. NTU is a large institution. We have very strong government support. But when it came to COVID, for many, many months, we were kind of on our own. And what NTU did was really led by a significant $100,000 gift from our president, Subra Suresh, and his wife, Mary, a $100,000 gift to establish the NTU Priorities Fund. What the NTU Priorities Fund was essentially a vehicle for us to then go out to our current donors, say, you know, we appreciate your past giving. Here are the issues moving forward with our students and with some of our staff. So we had a number of staff who actually came across the causeway into Singapore every day from Malaysia, who were significantly impacted by the Singapore government's decision to close the borders. So they essentially had to decide, do I want to keep my job, stay in Singapore, or do I want to go back to my family and my country in Malaysia? Many of them chose to stay in Singapore and were actually housed on NTU's campus. The challenge is they were then without support systems. So what we did was work with some of our major faculty and staff ambassadors to make sure that any of the private philanthropy that we were outsourcing with our foundation and corporate partners was going to true financial the neediest of the needy on campus. So we had students who were coming to us for gifts, you know, seeking a $50 gift to, you know, purchase a new rice cooker. But we're also seeing some students who literally both of their parents had lost their job, they had lost their job. There was just no other recourse for them in terms of a way to seek funds. So this was a great opportunity for us because it allowed us to have conversations with some donors, particularly our major gift and principal gift prospects and donors who maybe hadn't made a gift this year. So again, it was really driven by the immediacy of a gift to a priority fund for COVID relief. So I bring this up here because it really is an important way when we think about what we did during COVID, the funds that we created, the funds that we were distributing to students and other faculty and staff were really a linchpin for them to think about how they give back to society and how they essentially pay it forward. So here's where, you know, some of my earlier slides when I was talking about our faculty and staff campaign, this is where it really came to fruition. So our during an offsite board meeting, we were having a conversation of some of the challenges that COVID had put on the finance team at NTU. And from behind me, I heard somebody say, well, what are we going to do with all of our leave? So there were thousands and thousands and thousands of days of annual leave that people were accruing, but we weren't able to spend. Nobody could leave the island of Singapore. So how do we either reimburse employees for their leave? What are we going to do? And somebody from behind me said, well, can't we just donate it? And we all kind of looked at each other and said, this is a fantastic idea. So it took about 2 months for myself, my CFO, and our HR team to really work out how we would be able to do this. But again, because we had built this culture of philanthropy with our faculty and staff, we relatively quickly knew that this was going to be a gangbuster project. So initially, I estimated we're going to get about $1 million worth of unused annual leave. My estimation was blown out of the ballpark. We actually collected close to $10.3 million from unused annual leave. Again, from 1,800 faculty and staff. Most of these folks were not donors. So again, this was an opportunity for them to take a benefit to them, turn it into an opportunity for them to show their support for a university program that was directly impactful for them. So there were actually 19 different funds that employees could give to. And we actually found that our deans had a really great opinion of this program. And they actually worked with us really closely and did a number of direct appeals to their constituents as well during this whole exercise. So again, when we talk about going from a $20 or $50 gift from a faculty and staff member, which we celebrate and we're super excited about, to somebody making a $2,000 or $3,000 or $4,000 gift of their annual leave, we want to make sure that we're actually paying attention to these opportunities as they come up, because the people closest to us are the ones who absolutely know our mission. They're the ones who value the work that we're doing. And they're the ones who, when they can, are the ones who are going to give back. Okay, so talking the micro scale to the bigger, major gift scale. I had worked with a medical institution, the Xianche Medical Institution, for about 3 years, working with them with our Business and Corporate Partners Program, our BCP program. And they were routinely a $10,000 donor. I went and visited them every year, very thankful for their gift. How can we help you? What are you interested in? They always said students. They always were interested in how they could get more students interested in Chinese language, in Chinese clan associations, how they could get students more excited about their individual history. So in the conversation with my team who directed our graduation giving program, we decided it was now time to make a bigger impact. And what we wanted to do was actually create a matching gift program so that whenever seniors made a gift, they would know that this gift was being doubly counted. It was going to be matched by another institution. And so we asked Xianche if they were interested, and they said yes. It was the easiest ask I have ever made in my 23 plus years of University of Institutional Fundraising. They were absolutely overjoyed. And the fact that this gift is spread over 10 years, for us at NTU, it means we have a strategic partner over 10 years who will be matching the senior class gift and is there to absolutely partner with programming, with invitations, with anything related to promoting this gift. So while the flat gift is $1 million, it's actually worth much, much more in terms of exposure for both us and for Xianche. All right. So, and please feel free to pop in any questions. So how did other organizations outside of NTU steward their donors during COVID? And I have to tell you, most of these came from friends or myself who had, we were lucky and we actually started giving more during COVID. So I think everybody's pretty aware of the scouting movement here in the US. I'm a proud member of the Girl Scouts of the US. And one of the great things that I saw during COVID is the fact that more and more of these organizations were trying to reach out. They were trying to create a database. They were trying to research their people. Valentina was right on. They were doing some good work. And it starts oftentimes with a survey. So NTU also did a survey about 6 months ago, reconnecting, making sure that people understood what the mission was. It was a very simple survey, but it kind of gives you that warm feeling that, hey, they're trying something. And I'll tell you, it's personalized. Good afternoon, Liza. That goes a long way. And I'll talk a little bit about it later, but the Amazonification, if we look at how Amazon, every email we get from Amazon is very, very personal. That's what we want to see with our stewardship as well, whether or not it's a $5 gift or it's a $100 gift. So, the great thing about Girl Scouts of Central Maryland is how it started about 1.5 years ago to how it's going. So I actually met up with this director of annual giving on a Zoom call. We had a great conversation. He's starting out in his career as a major gift officer or an annual giving officer. And he just sent me, some great patches that, are anybody who's in scouting knows how great these are. So again, he's using something fundamental to the organization to create that stewardship bond. And I got to say, it was absolutely worth it. You totally hit it. So let me take you through another piece of how institutions were reconnecting with donors and prospects during this kind of lull during COVID. So I think many of us understand and know the Zoom talks, how this happens. You create a Zoom profile for your alumni. I got this email and I thought, oh, that's a really interesting talk. I don't know who this woman is, but I'm sure it'll be great. So I RSVP'd, got a great email. The second one here, got a great email saying, hey, don't forget you're signed up for this talk. The third one is, thank you for coming. Here's the video of the talk. And then about a week later, I got a, hey, take the survey. Again, a little bit reverse of how Girl Scouts did it. But this was a great opportunity for my alma mater to really figure out what people were interested in doing, what they were interested in hearing during this lull time of COVID. And it worked. All right. This is the Amazonification, which I can't be credited with coming up with the name, but I love it. So I'll keep saying it. But when we look at appeals that we receive or appeals that we're sending out, we have to make sure that we're using our database appropriately and that we're sending it out as much as possible personalized. So again, I was invited to attend an event. I was the recipient of the award, sent it to me, it was personalized. And then I received a thank you, also personalized, and it went through kind of an overview of what actually happened during the event. Great use of sponsor information as well. Lego Group was the sponsor for this event, and they got a lot of bandwidth. Sorry, Anna, is everything okay?
Yes, you're a little bit running out of time, but
oh no.
yeah.
Okay, I think I've got 3 more slides. So I just wanted to share a little bit about how people can personalize, whether it's a major gift, big gift, small gift, gifts in between. And we all know that obviously personalization is important. The middle gift, the middle email here is actually a year-end tax deduction, and it actually was sent on 29 December at 9:49. So again, people making sure that they're taking every opportunity for that final gift, I appreciate. And this again was during COVID, making sure people understood what the link was, why you're getting this email versus something else. I'll skip over this amazing stuff from Purdue. But again, making sure that consistency of look and design, particularly when you're having Zoom calls, any Zoom interaction, making sure that your donors, your prospects know that it's coming from you. Okay, more examples. All right, I'll finish. I am a CFRE. I am a CFRE ambassador. I'm happy to talk to anybody who's interested in becoming a CFRE. The application deadline is looming in 66 days. If you need any help going through the application, happy to help. And here's
excellent. Thank you very much, Liza. Sorry for shortening your presentation.
No problem.
It was an amazing one.
No problem.
Really nice. I love the sign of solidarity that you created during COVID at your university. And I'm actually really interested now to hear from our attendees if they would like to. if they actually engage students to become future major gift donors and how they do that, it's such a great approach. I mean, obviously you're a young university, but just in general, it's such a great approach to work with what you have. And I think it's a very good lesson also outside the university world, right? For a lot of other organizations on how they could slowly create their own long-term database of allies, right?
Well,
thank you very much.
Yeah,
it is a slow process.
Yeah.
Yes, I think so. But I also do think that in terms of institutional management, we do need to look also for the long term, right? Not always only on the short term or the one-term gift that could come in. So it's definitely worthwhile to do that. It brings me to my other remark that I wanted to give, which is about the nice way how you transformed a major gift donor into a really long-term annual strategic partner. And I think it's a very good example on how to do that. And I wonder, maybe Sheila from your university, if you could share your experiences on this, and if you do that, how you do that, how you work with major gift donors to become long-term strategic partners.
I just want to say thank you to Lisa. That was an amazing presentation. So thank you. It was great examples. For us, it's all about showing the difference that major gift has made. So we work hard at the stewardship of the impact that gift has made. So we try and give really realistic and practical examples of that by, if it's a major donor who's giving to scholarships, then part of the scholarships recipients have to now, every scholarship recipient that receives a donor funded scholarship has to write a letter of gratitude to the donor that we facilitate to sending back to the donor. We, at the end of their year, we ask the student to write a letter of how their year has gone to the donor, which we also facilitate, so that we're trying to, at the beginning and at the end of that 1 year scholarship, keep that stewardship up. So we are connecting as much as we can. We've got a really great example at Otago. We launched a student hardship fund called Putia Tautoko, so very similar to what Lisa has talked about, which was led by our VC. So she announced when the first lockdown happened in New Zealand that she would give 20% of her salary for 6 months to student hardship. And we then went out, and we were in lockdown at the time. We very quickly developed an online appeal that we sent out to all our communities. And from that, we have raised over $600,000 to date, and money still comes in from the appeal alone. 700 new donors to the university. So these are people who have never donated before. So our big task now is keeping them and converting them to become major donors and moving through that pipeline. So, and one of the ways we're doing that is we are trying to keep up the engagement. So we've just videoed 4 students who have received Putia Tautoko hardship grants. And we are just putting that video together, and we'll be sending that out to all the donors. And it's students just speaking, into their heartfelt gratitude for the support they've received. And so our focus now is just trying to keep them engaged, keep them connected, and keep them giving. So, we are working hard at that.
Can I follow up, Sheila? Just one of the things that we started doing recently at NTU, I think because we had more time on our hands, but we do the similar thing that any student who receives a bursary or a scholarship that's paid for with philanthropy writes a thank you note. One of the things that we were able to do with that note is making sure that it's not just kept in that donor file, but it's also kept in the student's individual file, so that we can refer back to it about 10 years from now when they're thinking about making a gift, and we can say, hey, we came across this great, file in our old file, hint, and we're just super excited. So we've been able to really spend more or pay more attention to our own data and making sure that all of these little pieces that are kind of little get actually put back into the database. So it's, again, another piece that I think we wouldn't have had time for, or we wouldn't have seen the necessity for pre-COVID, but during COVID, we had time to actually make that happen.
That's really great, Liz. That's a great suggestion. Thank you.
Excellent. Edward, what do you think? Would this be something that can be transferred to the charity world?
Yes, I think I always find that university is the most sophisticated in the whole fundraising process, from prospect research all the way to stewardship, everything. So I think for nonprofit, of course, especially for small to medium-sized one, they have a lot they can copy, they can learn from university or education institutions. Because from my experience, I find most of those small to medium-sized nonprofits, particularly in Hong Kong, they don't have any plan to do stewardship. They do it bit by bit. They do it ad hoc. They send something to their donors or prospects. Just they think it is nice to have something to send them. I always joke to them that this is not a dating. You have to do it very structurally, strategically. Every step must have add value to the whole process and have to be record every single step to help you to enable you to develop, to strengthen the relationship. So yes, as our speaker suggests, we should have a calendar, have a whole year plan or even 2 years plan, how we should do it for the prospect in general or to a particular major gift donors. So yes, this is something that we could learn from the perspective of charities, learn from universities, education institutions. Yes.
Nicole, do you want to add on that? I'm really curious to hear actually how the art world does that.
Yeah, I love this chat, and I love this chat about stewardship and how important it is in our organisations. Really, really excited to talk as well about those, and obviously we're talking about major gifts, but those annual givers, our benefactors, our alumni, those people that engage with us regularly and what that looks like. There's firstly here at HOTA, in the shortest term, we've had 3 benefactors who have previously given us annually between $1,000 and $2,000 a year, increase their donation to over $100,000. And those benefactors didn't come up in any wealth screens. They weren't people that were on our radar. They were people that we've continued to nurture and engage with. And it's been really clear to us that people who are already connected to us are our biggest major gift prospects. And not research is super important, but don't make too many assumptions about things. And the other thing I was interested in just commenting on there, obviously we need to take opportunities when they come up and be intuitive with our market, which is what Liza did with the annual leave campaign, which is beautiful. And I loved hearing about that. And similarly, in a way, in our organisation, we have had to cancel many, many shows. As you can imagine, we put a performance on, we cancel it, we transfer, all of those kind of things. Our box office team has done a fantastic job of becoming fundraisers where when we call everybody we don't just email our people to say the show's cancelled, we actually call them and give them the option of a money back, their refund, or donating that money, their ticket, to our arts programs. So you can imagine through that the new donor pool that we've identified, because it might be $150 a ticket, it might be an $80 ticket that we never had before, that are now our philanthropic supporters because they've in fact donated their ticket back to us.
What it actually shows, right, that that a lot of major gift donors have probably started off small anyway, right? And we should not assume that we get in a major gift as a very first donation, obviously depending on the relation that we have with the donor. But I think it's really important, and what really comes out of this discussion is how important it is to cherish the smaller donations and this less important donations, because the probability that they could become major gifts and even regular major gift donors is so high if we do it properly. Do do you have any advice to give on a best strategy on how to steward those donors so that they evolve from a middle or a small donor to a major gift donor? Maybe John or Frank. Actually, John, I think is not here at the moment. So maybe. Oh, you're here. You're here. Good.
There's so much to comment on in what everybody said, but I'll try and answer your question. Firstly, yes, it's absolutely important, but extremely productive to steward your donors. And it's finding the appropriate way. Obviously, you want to scale it according to the size of the gift. And secondly, whatever you reciprocate with, whatever the gift is, it's a wonderful opportunity to reinforce your case for support and reinforce your institutional identity. So Lisa showed us some good examples of that. Arts organizations and educational organizations, particularly universities, when they are looking after their donors of any size, but again, bearing in mind you scale it up according to the size of the gift, have lots of opportunities to give people privileged access, sort of behind stage, meeting in the art sense, meeting artists, in the academic sense, meeting some wonderful researchers and teachers and communicators. So any events, and of course we can still do this in the online world, as Sheila described. Anything that you can give your donors as a way of an appreciation that gives them something that other people don't have, insights, contacts, connections that other people don't have, are great ways of stewarding. And I just want to make a final comment, referring back to that lovely box with the, they look like lemons to me, Lisa, but you said they were oranges, so I'll take your word for it, they're oranges. I just wanted to make an observation, but Frank and Edward may or may not agree with me, but I think unlike many of us in Australia and New Zealand and kind of more Western cultures who are uncomfortable with reciprocal gifts of that nature, it is often very much appreciated by major donors in Asia. It's certainly been my experience, and I've observed others doing the same, that gifts like that, again bearing in mind the scalability of them and the appropriateness of them, are actually an important tool in stewardship. Am I right?
Absolutely. And the presentation box that you saw was actually, we only created about 150 of them, and they were for our top donors. So these were all people who had given more than $1 million. So the box itself was about $28, the cost of travel to go to deliver it to the offices. So it was around a $50 gift to our major gift donors who had given over $1 million. So for us, it made sense. It was an opportunity for us to have one-on-one interaction. And we were lucky to see them actually displayed throughout the year, particularly in corporate offices and foundation offices, which for us, branding, great opportunity to have a conversation.
Excellent. And I can see also from the audience that especially the idea of donating tickets or converting tickets, which probably also goes with the idea of donating leave time, is very well appreciated and has been done in other organizations also. So I really like this creative way, like how organizations, universities actually overcame these challenges of the pandemic. Frank, I'll just take your input and then I'll ask my question. Frank, go ahead.
Thank you. One other element of stewardship that I like to keep my eye on is the prospect of particularly some of these major donors being engaged in some way in the governance of the organisation. It is an interesting recruitment process to consider whether they might be interested in doing more than just give money, but bring their time and wisdom as well. And additional to that, the hope always is, of course, that they'll be able to bring other potential donors with them. So keep an eye, in my view, keep an eye on governance opportunities for major donors as they emerge.
Definitely, very, very good advice, Frank. Thank you. What I would love to hear actually from this ways how organizations dealt with the pandemic and the challenges that came with it, especially around stewardship, is what of these activities or ideas would you take on even after COVID-19? Like, for instance, this idea of giving annual leave, of donating annual leave, or refunding tickets as a donation to the organization. It's such a great idea that it would actually be a good one to keep on forever, right? So I would love, could you give me a little bit of your analysis, let's say like this, what we could keep on and learn from stewardship during the pandemic for the future? Maybe, Nicole, do you want to start?
Yeah, there's obviously, like we've spoken about, that mix of things, and I think there's some things that we did that are really cool and that they're really relevant to a moment, and it's hard to know what the lifetime will be of those things. You know, for example, with the giving your tickets back, like that will soon, that now moves to giving a donation with your ticket purchase, because let's, fingers crossed, not be cancelling too many more shows. I think that during the pandemic, obviously, I think it's made us stay quite focused in the sense that we're doing the basic things. We're making the phone calls, we're sending the emails, we're being really mindful of staying in touch with people. That's hugely important. I think we've been really focused on taking the opportunities with people that are close to us and that are close by, and making sure that we do that. And I guess operating a little bit more leanly and things, I'm sure other organisations have experienced this. We've probably been doing less of spinning our wheels and more responding to opportunities, and just generally communicating in as many ways as we can, with much more focus about what we want to achieve and what we want to do. And I think that's a wonderful lesson for us to all take forward.
And I just see that, Liza, at your university, you do the staff leave donation exercise on a 2 years.
It was only approved
period?
for a 2 year, only approved for 2 years. So 2020 and 2021.
I see. And do you think that could be expanded?
I think the will is there. Obviously, the infrastructure is already created. The challenge will be once people are able to travel, which is actually starting the end of this month, there won't be as much leave to be donated. So really, we anticipate if people are actually able to leave the island the end of this month, people will use their leave in 2022. So it's unlikely that it would continue.
Edward, how about the charity world? Do you see that they can benefit from what they did during the pandemic and keep it going afterwards? Is there an added value to that?
I think the major lessons nonprofit can learn from the pandemic, the COVID lesson, is that they are more able to figure out how to communicate with their donors or prospects, because nowadays we are no longer able to meet them as often as we used to be in person. So we are moving online, as we all said before. We are moving online. So nonprofits have to figure out or write on the experience throughout the pandemic period time, how we could engage, we could steward our donors and prospects in a new way, maybe through technology, maybe online, or whatever other creative way.
Very well said. Just before we go into the break, I wanted to ask the panelists, but also anybody else who would be happy to share this with us, about the most common mistakes you think people have done when stewarding donors, be it international major gift donors or major gift donors within your country. Is there anything you could share with us which really should not be done, because it just takes donors away from your cause? Maybe Sheila, do you want to start?
I really can't think of anything. I mean, probably the reverse, probably assuming that donors don't want to be contacted as often as, you know, so you leave them alone, but actually it's probably the reverse. You know, they probably, you know, you don't want to overload them with too much stewardship and too much contact. So you think, oh, I'll just, you know, but, you know, I met with a major donor, you know, yesterday, and they said, why haven't you been in touch? And I sort of thought, oh, okay, good lesson. So, you know, I think it's probably that, you know, you're assuming because of COVID, you're assuming because it's a pandemic, and you're assuming all these things that people are stressed and a whole lot of things in life, but probably, you know, probably actually doing more than you think you should from my perspective is probably one of the lessons that I've learned.
Mm-hmm. John, do you agree to that?
Yeah, absolutely. And kind of tangentially, but what I was reflecting on a little bit earlier was a mistake that I know one or two organizations have made, and it's not necessarily to do with major gifts, but of course it applies to major gifts. There's the organizations that have decided not to engage with their donors or their prospective donors, or have just given up on fundraising, have defunded fundraising. And sadly I've seen that happen with 2 or 3 organizations that I was involved with in the first year of the pandemic. When was that? Last year. It was in fact, and has been in fact, for those organizations that have continued to steward their donors and engage with people. It actually has a great opportunity, if you had a really good case for support, to get people on board, because people and those organizations that have been going you know, ongoing with their fundraising have proved it again and again. People have been very generous, very supportive, and a lot of organizations have actually exceeded their expectations in terms of fundraising income during this pandemic. But to have not fundraised and to have ignored your supporters and potential supporters, you know, has been a catastrophic mistake in the case of some organizations.
That's a very valuable advice, actually. Thank you very much for that. Liza, do you want to add on that?
No, I was just thinking about you know, the worst case scenario when it came to stewardship, and it was partnering with an outside organization. We thought that there was a lot of resonance with the 2 organizations, and this was again with our China chapters. It was horrible. It was horrible. So I would say, you know, when it comes to any partnership opportunity, be very, very careful. You want to make sure that they're not offering something that you can do in-house. I think the way that messes with the heads of some of your alumni is they then see that organization as a philanthropic avenue, whereas you went into it with the clear intention that this was a help. And it actually turned some gifts away. So be very, very careful, when it comes to partnering with outside organizations.
Thank you very much for sharing this, Frank.
Sorry to infringe on the afternoon tea time, but just quickly, I'd endorse what John said. Organisations I've been involved with who continued on with their fundraising programs have enjoyed record successes, and contrasted with that is those who ran scared and closed down and thereby have done themselves a disservice. There are 2 other observations I have in that regard. One is I'm heavily involved in bequest or planned giving programs, depending where you sit, and I've found that it's been a great time to reach people because they're sitting at home, the phone rings and they will answer it. And so accessibility from that point of view has been good. Conversely, however, and I'd be interested to know if others have encountered this, conversely, with the incidence of scam phone calls about at the moment, some of the people I deal with are finding that they're having difficulty getting their phone calls answered. If it's an unknown number ringing in, And those of us who are working from home tend to be ringing in on a mobile number, which is clearly going to be unknown. It tends not to be answered in many cases. And that's making contact, contrary to what I just said about accessibility, it's making contact even more difficult.
True. I'm the first one not to answer, to be very honest, if I don't know the number on my mobile phone. Thank you very much. Yes, it is like that. Thank you very much for this this really nice panel discussion. We will have another 10 minutes break, and I think we do the 10 minutes even if we are slightly behind time. And then I see you all in a few minutes. Thank you very much. Welcome back to the IFAB2021 on our last session for tax and legal issues around fundraising across borders. This session, I welcome again Nancy Bixon, who is our expert for tax and legal and the managing director of Chaplain York. Nancy, I will not introduce you any more than that, as I've already done it in the very beginning, so I'll just hand over to you, and I'm curious to hear what you have to say.
Thank you very much, Anna. And I will try not to do a bit of yawning during this. I am reminded, however, that as the last speaker again at an event in Asia Pacific, Frank Opre and I did a speech at NUS nearly 20 years ago, where we were running about 3 hours behind, and after us was supper. So thank you very much for keeping to time on this, because I think he and I each had about 4 minutes to try to say something sensible. It may be that 4 minutes is all that people really want to hear sensible things about tax and legal. So what I'm going to do now is just try to say a couple of words about some of the issues that are going on in that world that you might want to be aware of if you are fundraising internationally. And then I really want to talk a little bit more about this whole issue of setting up entities abroad and running them versus foundations. So the couple of things I just wanted to mention is that if you are fundraising in the US, it is really important that this year there's some extra benefits available for major donors. The limitations on donations have been lifted, so anything is deductible 50%, and all donations are tax deductible without worrying about the bottom limits. So if you are doing some stuff in America, this is a really good time to make certain that you are in there. Year-end giving is of course a big thing there. 33 to 30% of all donations come in the last 3 months of the year, and there are queues at post boxes because checks and things have to go in the post by the 31st of December to get the tax deduction in the year. So you've got about 6 weeks to make sure that your messaging is out there to get those end of year donations, not only in the US but also in Canada. Those are the only two that really work on this end of year giving. So that's one thing. Second of all, just a reminder of the benefits in the United Kingdom, because people do sort of forget about us a little bit here. We have this amazing system, or bonkers system, depending on how people want to look at it, where if a donor is giving to a charity, if you're giving £100, as long as you've paid tax on that £100, the charity, as long as it's a UK charity, is able to go to the UK government and reclaim the tax that the donor paid on that donation, which is 25%. So it means you get 125% for doing no extra work except ensuring that somebody is claiming the gift aid. And that's such a really amazing benefit. It makes the UK government one of the biggest donors in the whole world. So it's absolutely important to ensure that you are doing something sensible in the UK, and we'll talk about that in a second about what that sensible looks like. But we are a pretty good place for donations. I want to mention Europe because there is sometimes some confusion about Europe, and people talk about European charities. There is no such thing as a European charity. Every country in Europe has got its own laws and its own regulations. And they have been talking about trying to have one system for philanthropic charities and giving, etc., in Europe. I won't see it out in my lifetime. I doubt if my grandchildren will. So if you are fundraising in Europe, there are certain things that you can do. We'll talk about Chapel York Foundations, but there's also something called Transnational Giving Europe, so that if you are, if the donor in one country is giving to another country in Europe, they can use a system that will ensure that donors get tax deductions. And of course, most of the world has tax deductions, or as in Canada, even better tax benefits, which in Canada, I know a lot of people are interested in Canada. Canada has been a very, very international country, and they had a system where particularly universities could register directly with Revenue Canada. Revenue Canada has decided that it wants to be the most horrible revenue in the world, and they're doing a pretty good job of it. I can say that because the Canadians will agree with me. So we have some options for you in Canada now, so that you don't have to register directly. But it is a very good benefit to donors in Canada. They get to, instead of taking a tax deduction against their income, they get to take a reduction against the actual tax they pay. I probably don't need to tell those of you in Australia that there's still no tax deductions for giving internationally, except for very, very little bits of giving to poverty. But we have lots of people. I mean, I think I probably get a question a week about what about giving from Australia, and it still doesn't work. So, and there are lots of other countries, as we know, that that there are tax deductions, like Singapore even, that have to benefit the Singaporean community. Although there are some workarounds there for taking deductions for research and development as opposed to charitable donations. So that's kind of my brief. There are bits of the world. If anybody has a question about another bit of the world, I'm happy to answer it. But that's the sort of main just updates on what's going on with taxes around the world. Somebody usually always asks me about Nepal, and I keep forgetting what the answer is, and have to go away and research it quickly whilst I'm trying to answer it. But what I really want to talk about is this question of setting up entities. It keeps coming up. And 25 years ago, when Chapel York started, we started by setting up 501c3s in America, and we've done hundreds of things, and we still manage hundreds of things. And the same thing with setting up UK charities, and the same thing with setting up Section 88s in Hong Kong, etc. And it felt like a reasonable thing to do for all those years, but the regime was so different then. Nobody worried very much about charities. Everybody loved us. They loved organizations that were nonprofits, and the world is changing. Banks have become a four-letter word. And they see that anything going outside the country as being a terrible idea. I've been working with an Australian client to try to get somebody else on the bank account so they can get the money out of the bank in New York. And it's become almost such a nightmare that I'm going to have to almost fly to New York just to go see the bank. The banker doesn't want to answer the phone calls. It is absolutely horrific. So over this period of doing this kind of work, I'm really coming around to the idea that unless you absolutely think that you need an entity and you have a really good reason, you almost have to wrestle me to the ground to get to set up an organization. I mean, we had a cathedral come to us and say, we need a charity in the States, and we said, why do you want one? And they said, well, every other cathedral has one. That is not the right answer. That is the wrong answer, because as a matter of fact, it fell apart because they couldn't come up with board members. The right answer, I think, and where we're going with Chapel York is through using other organizations if at all possible. So we have set up, we now have 7 foundations around the world, in Singapore, Hong Kong, Switzerland, the Netherlands, the UK, the US, and now Canada. And that gives us the opportunity for organizations to have a presence in a country, to accept tax deductible money, to be able to run events without having to have a local bank account, a lot of options without having to have this organization set up. I've done a chart, and I will try to share it with you about this thing, because and I'm happy to send this to anybody, because I think that it is really important that people spend time and energy with what you're trying to do. And to me, again, the options are becoming really stark. The regulatory regimes have become increased. So that means that whether it's doing accounts, whether it's tax returns, this bit here about the the filings and things. I mean, that is, every country is just increasing it, because we aren't favored entities anymore. We're all seen to be funding terrorists. Deep down, there's such a worry about that, although nobody can figure out who a terrorist is until they commit an act. So it's that in itself is becoming more expensive to run and more painful to run. I want to talk for a moment about boards, because boards have been seen to be, a wonderful thing for organizations. I mean, I'm going to have a board in another country, and that board is going to be absolutely fantastic for us. Out of the hundreds of organizations that we've run over the years, I would say there are probably 10 boards that have actually been a wonderful thing for the home organization. There's probably been 50, well, that's probably too high, 30 that have gone completely rogue and had to be almost dismissed so that they could get in people who actually, I mean, to the extent even that the board has decided they don't want to support the organization that set up the entity. That is probably the worst situation. But then you get people who have decided they don't want to support the library. They really want to support something else, even though people gave money for the library, etc. Or bizarre situations where boards have decided that what they really want to do is throw very, very nice parties for themselves and the people who their donors, and no money ever ends up going to the home entity. So boards, and the other thing about boards is that they are a really mixed blessing. They are not professional fundraisers. So do you want them to be the people who are actually out there fundraising for you? And then if you train them up which is wonderful, as ambassadors and things, then you've got more volunteer management to do, because the worst thing to do is to have a very, very enthusiastic board that you don't then have the time to steward in an appropriate way, because they then want to go off and do things, and then you've got to figure out what in the world they're going to do. So I think that boards, I mean, it is possible we do board training for people, and it has been effective, but it is yet another expense, and as I say, more time. So that is another issue. If done properly, it can work, and I don't want to say that it doesn't work, but it is certainly not the panacea that people believe that it is, to get the board to do to be your ambassador, when there are other options. Come on, I'll come around the other options. In countries like the States and Canada particularly, where people actually send checks in, you've got to have an address and somebody who gets these things. So our clients use us, which is fantastic. I have a person sitting in a desk in New York with now a window, and she does nothing but deal with checks all day long. But that is, and again, we have clients who say, oh, we don't really need somebody, one of the board members will deal with checks. What do you do when the check is sitting in their house when they're on holiday for a month? What kind of stewardship? In countries particularly where these are sophisticated people who expect you to acknowledge the checks as quickly as possible, and you would never do that in your home country. So why in the world would you allow yourself to do it in another country? That's another thing. banks, I've talked about 4-letter words. They seem to keep closing charity accounts for absolutely no reason, even when there's tons of money. You've got to have bookkeeping. You've got to have donation. You've got to deal with the administrative tax. It's not a disaster to do. And obviously people do it all the time, but I just want to stop people from doing it without being very, very careful when we think there are other options that you can use. However, there are also good things. You know, you've got the flexibility of your own people. You can have board meetings you want. You can make grants every other day if you want to. You know, there are things that you can do, and that's really important. And there are advantages for some of those things. But again, just be aware, be afraid, be very, very afraid when you're getting into these things, because it seems like so often a really, really good idea, and often they aren't. However, on the other side is you're going to probably have to pay an intermediary some funds to do this. But unbelievably, there's something called the BSUF, the British Schools and Universities Foundation in America, which charges nothing, takes no fees, no membership fees, but then will not tell you anything at all about your donors. And so suddenly you just get a check from them. They won't tell you when donations come in. And they have over 100 people who will use them because they are free. That drives me to absolute distraction, because how can we, as professional fundraisers, and I can say this because I'm not talking to other British fundraisers, but how can you actually suggest that that is a really good way to handle an operation when people will give you money, even major gifts, without you potentially knowing that anybody's received it? So I think sometimes that, to me at least, is money that should be well spent to get the right thing. Finally, on the intangible side, every now and then you get a donor who says, I'm not giving to something that's not you, or not your own organization. And I think probably, again, over 25 years, I've had 10 of those donors, and I've managed to convince 9 of them that it's a perfectly reasonable, you know, financially decent option. We do have occasionally, and we'll come to this, but people who say, well, what if we use an intermediary like a Chapel in York Foundation? What if they, you know, could they take our money? The answer in some countries is probably yes. I've always said that we'd have to wait until we got so much money in that we could retire on it forever, because no one would ever use this, of course, again. We did actually get a $14 million donation for a university this year, and this was the only time I was actually looking at those figures. And I have to say the university got the money, but it does happen occasionally, and so there is a bit more management in terms of using that. So this is my kind of chart about the pros and cons. Again, very happy to deal with it. But so what we've tried to do at Chapel in York is to come up with, we've looked at what's out there in terms of intermediaries, and we've tried to create something which we think is a pretty robust model of how these things work. So one, by having a lot of foundations around the world, it means we can give people a one-stop shop for a lot of countries. 2, because we come from a fundraising and a charity side, we're trying to figure out what is the best for you, not what's the best for us. You know, what do you need out of this thing? So when a donor makes a donation, for example, you know, we do the receipt. You get a copy of the receipt instantly, because stewardship is so important in these things, because you do want to give the donor the option to do things, and to be able to thank people as quickly as possible. You know, we do things like monthly reports, so you know what's going on. Then we have some options which are very attractive, I think, to people, even to be honest, those that have their own organization. So, for example, our US and UK charities are linked, so that Americans who are living in the UK, or even Brits who are living in the US, if you're paying both taxes in the US and the UK, and we all know some who are, those people can give to our UK charity, and they get a UK gift aid. So you get the extra 25%. They get the tiny little UK tax benefit if they're what we call a higher rate taxpayer. But they also get a US tax deduction. So you're getting the extra 25%, and they're getting the US tax deduction as well. So because they're paying tax all over the place, it's a really great benefit. It's actually true that we can probably do the same thing with Hong Kong, but because of the problems in Hong Kong with foreign charities and the sort of suspicion, we're kind of keeping that incredibly quiet at the moment. If things ever improve, we'll sort of tell people about that. So I didn't just say that, but it is probably possible. The other sort of things that we think that we're able to do, for example, is our Dutch foundation is an entree point into the EU. So if you've got donors from the EU, sometimes rather than you can't get into transnational giving, but our Dutch foundation can partner with you to get into that, so that you can offer tax benefits to any of your donors who are there. And of course, Switzerland, we know, has a lot of expats that are living there and earning money that want to give back. And in fact, Switzerland was our very first foundation that we were in. Well, Hong Kong was the first one we did, but we actually started the whole procedure because we had a Australian university that was expecting $40 million out of Switzerland, and transnational giving couldn't do the work. So, and finally, I just want to mention Canada, because Canada has got a bizarre situation for foreign gifts. So rather than just being able to make a grant as we do in all the other countries, in Canada, we have to call the foreign organization that's going to get the money. We have to say that we are going to do it. So if we're going to build a library in Malaysia, we have to, as a Canadian foundation, say that we want to build the library in Malaysia, and the university that just so happens to be where the library is going to exist is going to be our agent for building the library on their campus. So we have to give them the money as our agent, and so there's extra paperwork and things, but it's all very possible, and it's all very doable from Canada. But very interesting, Canada, the way they're looking at stuff. So that's sort of all I really wanted to say. I just didn't want to spend, I know it's the end of a long day and a long conversation, so I didn't want to say anything else, but I'm very happy to answer questions from anybody that has about anything I haven't said or anything I have said. So thank you very much. And by the way, as MD of Chaplain York, I just thank everybody for a fantastic day, both our speakers and panelists, and also those of you that have come. I hope that you've thought that this is as wonderful as I have. Thank you all very, very much. Anna,
thank you very much, Nancy. Thank you very much, Nancy, for this very valuable insight in tax and legal issues. Your session was actually, I think, the most awaited for, because during our poll, it turned out that the major challenges our attendees identified in their major gift fundraising cycle is actually the tax and legal issues around the major gift, international major gift fundraising. You literally answered all my questions without even that I have asked them. So can I just quickly ask you to go back to the specific situation of not setting up an entity in Canada? Is there a particular difficult process in Canada of doing so, or maybe I have missed this point actually?
Canada used to have a system where a university could register directly with Revenue Canada and didn't have to go through anything. It didn't need their own Canadian charity, or it didn't need to go through our Canadian foundation or anyone else's. And the gifts would still be tax effective in Canada. But in numbers of years, in the last couple of years, it's become much more difficult to do so. I've had reports of universities giving up. It also is difficult. So for those universities that have colleges underneath them, colleges and schools are not eligible to directly register with Revenue Canada. So I know, for example, University of Melbourne, Frank, and others that have those kinds of things, they would have to go through us to be able to get tax effective giving. So it's just become much more difficult for universities, and it's also restrictive in terms of educational institutions.
We don't have a panel discussion after the session, because we are coming to the end of the IFAB21, but so I would like to open up the floor actually for general question and answers. Feel free to obviously ask any of our speakers directly. Any questions you have about what you have heard, or things, questions you came into this conference, questions you had in mind coming into this conference, just feel free to shout them out to us. And there will for sure be one of this amazing panel and speaker lineup who is able to respond to you. Liza, I think you had a question actually, so I just take this one on about bringing funding out of India. Do you want to quickly elaborate on that?
Yeah, so we had a major gift pledged in 2019 that we took on face value, that the donor had already done his due diligence with the Bank of India to get the required approval. We received just over $1 million Singapore dollars in 2019. So that gift went through. He still has pretty significant pledge to pay off. Unfortunately, in 2020, with the pandemic, and because the money was flowing out of India, Bank of India declined to approve that bank transfer. So I'm wondering if in 2021, sorry, 2020, we didn't get the gift, 2021, if anybody has had a successful major gift come out of India in the $1 million range.
No reaction so far from our attendees. Frank,
that's what I expected.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you have any suspicion why?
Because it's going to Singapore. I think that's number one.
Oh, I see.
Number two is it's flowing outside of India without an Indian beneficiary. So I think there are a number of reasons why Bank of India would have concerns. That's why those money laundering, that's why all of those protocols were put into place. Like Nancy mentioned, you never know a terrorist until they do something bad. NTU is unlikely to do something bad with the money. But it's true that there are institutions like the one I used to work at in Mumbai, who could do wonders with that money. So I think there is some pressure for those donors to refocus their giving in country rather than the multi-million dollar gifts we saw in the US, the multi-million dollars of gifts we've seen in other places. So,
Frank, do you want to add on this, or you just raised your hand?
A question, if I may, Anna, to Nancy. Nancy, thank you for that presentation. Even after all these years, you continue to make international taxation both interesting and sometimes funny. So congratulations on that. But my question is, I missed your reasoning as to why 2021 is a good window of opportunity to be giving in the States. I wonder if you could repeat that, please.
Yeah, they passed some special legislation there. So generally a donation to a charity, a public charity in America, has an upper limit of, so a donor can only deduct up to 50% of their adjusted gross income. They ditched that during this year, and as far as I know, that is going to go back to, the limit's going to go back in place. So, but what it does mean is that if you're expecting a very big gift, people could deduct the whole thing without having to do carry forwards and carry backs and things. So that's one reason. The other reason is there's a sort of a floor, so that you either have what's called a standard deduction or itemized deductions in the States. And so very small gifts sometimes don't count because they're subsumed in the standard deduction. So again, this year they had a special thing where every donation was tax deductible. So this is just a really good year if you are, just to make sure that you're getting, and obviously if you're expecting a very large donation, you will probably have been pretty far down the track in terms of talking to people. So I should think that starting on, November 11th to try to do something by the end of the year for a donation which is going to exceed somebody's 50% of their adjusted gross income is probably a little bit late, but at least it is worth making certain that this is, it's also a good time to say something to people, to make sure that if you are kind of in conversation with people, just to say, well, how about making certain we do it this year, etc. That's the special benefits. The other thing I might add is that is just for those that don't know about planned giving in America for major gifts, because that's always something which comes up because it means so many different things in other countries. It means regular giving or a lot of things. But in America, it's a very specific set of very tax orientated, generally larger gifts that give additional, it's a whole suite of everything from a bequest to giving your car away, but it's also some really interesting, very sophisticated giving vehicles. So for example, a charitable remainder trust, you put property in a trust, you name the who's going to get it, which is wonderful for the organization because you're going to have it, unlike a will that could be changed. But the donor actually gets the income from that. So if you're trying to close a gift for somebody, for a very substantial gift, this is a really big thing over there because you're able to say to people, you're giving us the money, but at your death or after a period of years or at your spouse's death, where you're still going to continue to get income. In fact, we can probably increase your income that you had from those assets because most people give shares into these things. And every organization is able to offer that as long as you've got, you need to have a US entity. So it could be us, it could be if you have a 501c3, but everybody should be able to do it, even though it's incredibly sophisticated. There are tax lawyers, me, etc., out there that can do this for people. And again, with the whole thing about international giving, it's and the tax side of it, the actual giving side of it is about you and your case for support and why somebody should give. But the tax side of it is about trying to have a level playing field so that somebody says, well, I don't want to give to you because I can't get a tax deduction or tax benefit for giving to you, where I could if I gave to somebody else. Because if you're in competition, and we all sort of are, obviously our case for support tries to make clear why they need you, but I think that's really important that that's what you're trying to accomplish. And so I would very much suggest that, and if you're wondering what planned giving looks like, the best starting point is just look online at some of the US entities. Pick a university if you're a university, pick the Metropolitan Museum of Art if you're an art, and then steal everything they've got. There's a few you can't steal because they're harder to offer. But other than that, it's really a significant thing to just at least be aware of when you're having conversations with major donors in the States.
Interesting. That brings me to the question I had for you, Nancy, on due diligence, actually. Within this system of foundations, that does definitely help a lot of organizations, charities not needing to set up their own entity. How do you meet the due diligence needs, like the due diligence needs of these foundations and the due diligence needs of the charity or the organization who would use the foundation to do to accept their donations? Is there any particularity? Is there, how do you assure that the donors do come from a safe background?
Well, of course, just like any charity, because that's what our foundations are. We have a know your donor policy, and we have companies, and we do due diligence on all the donors. No matter what. I mean, we have very similarly to most organizations. Obviously, the bigger the donation, the more due diligence we do. And I mean, even to the extent that if we really were, well, we also do due diligence on any charity that wants to have a fund with a foundation. So we are absolutely as, you know, manic about this as anybody, because it's our reputation and it's our charitable status in the country as much as anything. And we have indeed turned down donations. We were offered £100,000 for a fund holder from a Brazilian company, and it turned up tons of money laundering problems in Brazil. Now, my guess is that if you could almost turn up money laundering problems in Brazil for any company, but the board absolutely wouldn't do it. You know, the board of that foundation just said we don't. It's a risk we don't want to take, and we actually worked with the fund holder to do something that. Something else, but it does happen. But we do have that for everything.
Good to hear. Thanks for clarifying. Are there any other questions from our audience? I see that people start leaving, so it has probably been quite a long day, and there were some who actually attended the whole 3-day IFAB, or at least a couple of sessions, also in the European and in the Americas time zone. So I just want to make sure that everybody is fine and doing well, and see if there are any other questions for our experts. No other questions? Any questions from the panelists to the panelists? Oh, Christine, she just said she had a question in the European session, so she will reach out to us to answer this. We just give her a minute to write it down in the chat. Yeah. Excellent. Welcome back, Nicole. She was on a little break, but she's now back with us. Also, feel free to. Sorry. Yes, Nancy, go ahead.
Can you say how jealous I am that you all are going into summer, because it's freezing here.
In Hong Kong, we're going into winter, and I can't wait for it, to be honest. I'm really looking forward to that. Just a reminder that we also have the Chaplain York Connect platform. So please connect with the speakers, the panelists, and amongst each other. The platform stays open even after the IFAB. So whatever question you might have, stay connected with us, and let's benefit from this unique opportunity that the IFAB creates, and Chaplain York also does create around being in direct contact with fellow fundraisers from around the world, which makes it so interesting to exchange our views on international fundraising and major gift fundraising. So let me just read out what Christina had as a question in the European session. I just read it out. We were encouraged to have calls with our beneficiaries and donors, and my organization works with marginalized people, making it appropriate to connect with them directly. Are there any recommendations for how we could bridge that gap and still show our impact? So it's really a question about cultivation stewardship, right? How, as we had a lot of examples around how students connect directly to their scholarship donors, for instance, or beneficiaries connect directly to a donor to write thank you cards or letters about how it goes. In her case, it's not possible to make this direct link. So how can you better engage the donor, and how can you bridge this as an organization? Who shall I direct this question to first? Maybe to Sheila, just because you came up with this example in the very beginning about your students writing to donors who donated their scholarship.
Yeah, I think Kirsten's asking a separate question, which I probably don't have much experience at, because she's talking about contacting marginalized people and it's not appropriate to connect them directly. You know, in New Zealand, we have a very, very strict Privacy Act. So if we're going to connect people we have to get their permission from both sides. So if we're going to connect students with donors, we have to get permission from those students to be able to do that. So I'm not sure that's going to be answering Christian's question. So I think someone probably works for a charity or not-for-profit might be better, or John may have some experience of that.
Well, then I just hand it over to John. He also raised his hand first, and give it over.
Well, if someone has some more direct and personal experience of this, please let them answer first. But it just happened that I've read a couple of papers recently, which I think might give a clue as to the best way around this. But if there's anyone who's actually been working with a charity that's actually tackled this problem, please speak up first.
So in India, I can speak to how we did it at IIT Bombay. Like in Australia, there's a very strong privacy policy. So the idea of a student writing a thank you note is just would never happen. So we actually had student volunteers who actually stood in place of a bursary recipient. And so while we used their face, while we didn't use their name, we made up a fake name, but was a real student. And we essentially had used that figurehead as a thank you for the gifts that came in for student support in particular, that we weren't able to really tell the story or have the students meet the donors. So students have every right to say no, that they don't want to write a note or they don't want to meet a donor. And in India, that's quite often the case because they are of a lower caste oftentimes, and they don't feel comfortable meeting with the donor. So it's a really uncomfortable situation for both the donor and the recipient. So we kind of found this workaround by using a stand-in.
Excellent idea. Nicole, how do you do that?
So this question I'd address through my past experience working in Aboriginal child and family welfare. Yes. So obviously not in terms of an arts organisation. And I would absolutely say not to get caught up on that, and not to get caught up in this is the way other organisations do it, or this is how alumni work with it. Obviously in the first instance, if you're not comfortable with it, your donors are not going to be comfortable with it. And more so, your great donors are going to absolutely understand deeply why they cannot be connected to those people. The one great thing that you can do is obviously retrospectively share success stories, even in the sense of, you know, in Australia, in terms of Aboriginal child and family welfare, you still would never actually show who it is. You would do a name change, but sharing stories of impact retrospectively is obviously a good thing, and any research around what you're doing. But I would definitely suggest that your donors will understand 100%, your great donors, why they're not being connected.
Thank you very much for this. I hope that answered your question, Christine.
Just very quickly, and Nicole's answer was superb, and she has the personal experience. But the point I was going to make, and it's received wisdom, and I don't know, Kristen, what type of organisation you have, but if you have field workers out where these marginalized people are being supported, then field workers are often the best people to tell the most authentic stories about the good that people's donations are doing. So in that sense, you're not connecting them directly with the beneficiaries, but you're connecting them with people who are very close and working with the beneficiaries and seeing the benefits of the donations.
Chris has also a very good response to that challenge. They are actually mobilizing students across the States and the UK and create pen pals where they connect children to orphans in Moldova, so children of the same age, gender, and the same gender, for the purpose of engaging their parents and securing long-term sponsorship. And he says that most organizations in Moldova are happy simply providing name, age, and gender, but nothing else. So no pictures, for instance. And this is how they connect donors with beneficiaries. This is a really nice approach. Thank you, Chris, for sharing that with us. John, your hand is still up. Do you? Oh, okay, I see. No? Excellent. And Christine says that they are doing creative writing workshops for those at-risk beneficiaries. There are amazing ideas around, really. I think we should never stop imagining what we could do to better bond with our donors, but also in a way maybe to better bond with our beneficiaries, right? Because they will continue to keep us in mind with whatever we have done for them. And then in cases like universities, where they then become the next potential donor, it is actually a really good means to drive it forward. We have another comment actually from Manasi, who says that in his previous organization, his or her, I'm very mindful of gender here, and I don't know about this name, I'm really sorry. They worked with marginalized women in India and Nepal and found field work sharing their experiences directly with donors, sharing written success stories, and worked really well to connect with international donors. Also a very good idea. Thank you very much for sharing, Manasi. Anybody else? If not, I propose that we close this webinar. We do still stay online on Chaplain York Connect to answer any questions and to network with each other. Also, please do network amongst yourself via the Chaplain Connect platform. I really would like to thank you all, the speakers, the panelists, and the attendees of IFAB 2021. I have only moderated now the Asia and Pacific session, but obviously I also would like to thank all the speakers and panelists from all the other sessions. We really hope that it helped your own fundraising challenges and that you gained a lot of knowledge from the experience shared here and from our experts on the various topics. We will send through the presentations so that you will have all the information in your email box. Also, we will also send through some information of upcoming events that we organize at Chaplain York. And with that, I just would like to say thank you very much for attending. Thank you very much for sharing your experiences with us. Thank you very much for being here. And I hope to see you soon again.